We are here this morning to have a discussion around our constitution. My name is Umaru Sanda Amadou. I'm a journalist. I work with City FM and City TV. I'll be your moderator this morning, and I'm excited and privileged and honored to be with you. And I'm thankful that I have a wonderful audience that is going to help me have this conversation. And I'm going to try and steer it to the best of my ability. So when we are done here, we'll all be celebrating and say it was worth coming. It's a One Ghana event. One Ghana is a group that was put together primarily by Senyo Hosi, who was a driver, and a number of people in there. We've done a number of things in the past. When he comes, he may share some of them with us. I'm a member of One Ghana movement. One Ghana it is, whether you are from the north or from the east, upper west, or the new regions of OT. You are in One Ghana, and we are hoping that we can develop our nation further beyond where we currently are. And that is what we are doing. And this lecture is just one of many that we've organized in the past, and we are hoping that we can proceed in a better way. So it's on the Constitution Day, and we do know that 7th January is Constitution Day. We have a holiday that we celebrate. But beyond the celebration and the party, let's look at the document that we signed and started using, which is our supreme law, the Constitution. And so this public lecture, jointly organized by One Ghana Movement and the UPSA Law School, is what you are attending, and we are coming to you live from the west wing of the UPSA auditorium. We are live on City TV, we are live on City FM, and a number of other media houses, City FM and City TV being the main partner media houses. The topic today is the 1992 Constitution, a fundamental law for our prosperity, or a well-crafted guide for our economic doom. Now, when they say economic doom and you are thinking of a haircut and an IMF program, then you do know that this is the right time to have this conversation. So without saying much, I'm going to invite for the main welcome address, Senyo Hosi. He is founder of One Ghana Movement, but he does a number of other things. When you listen to him on radio or watch him, you're not really sure what he's into. He's growing rice and selling because he says that let's grow domestic rice and sell it, so made in Ghana rice. He's doing that. He has been doing petroleum stuff. Now he's also doing cleave and tove. I'm not really sure how to introduce him, but Senyo Hosi is the founder of One Ghana Movement. And ladies and gentlemen, with a round of applause, please welcome him to give us the opening address.
Thank you, Umaru. I'm not founder of One Ghana Movement. I'm one of many people who founded One Ghana Movement, which is an institution, a not-for-profit organization set up to pursue the citizen responsibility, public policy accountability, and also public policy alternatives. We just need to find a way to trigger new thinking to help drive our country together as a country in pursuit of an environment where we prioritize the national interest over any sectorial interest or partisan interest. And that's what we are about at One Ghana. I'm very proud to be partnering the UPSA Law School for today's Constitution Day lecture, which will be the third. Members of Parliament present, distinguished guests, viewers, and listeners on air, ladies and gentlemen, you're all welcome to the third Constitution Day lecture organized by the One Ghana Movement and the UPSA Law School in partnership with City TV and City FM. Justice E.M.P. Soa, our former Chief Justice, in the landmark case, I know the lawyers will even finish it for me, 2-4 versus Attorney General, situates the Constitution so effectively when he posits, I quote with your permission, "A written Constitution such as ours is not an honorary act of Parliament. It embodies the will of a people. It also mirrors their history. Account, therefore, needs to be taken of it as a landmark in the people's search for progress. It contains within it their aspirations and their hopes for a better and fuller life." Unquote. I hope I got it right. As our aspirations and search for progress evolve as a country and as a people, it is imperative that we definitely take stock of how this living document and its operation delivers on its essence. Over the last 3 decades, various governments have served under the 1992 Constitution, and we too as citizens have also participated. We as guests to the country have also participated in delivering partly on the aspirations of this constitution. The governments have delivered partly. We citizens have also done the same. And equally have we all fallen short at different times. People of Ghana, all I see is progress in our democracy. We nonetheless need to consolidate our gains, revise our ways to assure relevance in the document meant to assure our fuller lives. Today, we bring to you one of Ghana's finest thinkers and patriots to deliver a lecture on the topic, the 1992 Constitution, a fundamental law for our prosperity or a well-crafted guide for our economic doom. As it was said to me this morning, in the poverty of thought lies the path to a country's failure. Be ready to be enriched, inspired to push forward the success of Ghana, our motherland. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you so much, senior anchorite. And senior anchorite, for those who don't know, because we didn't go to a popular school, we went to Tema Secondary School. So we call ourselves anchorites. Thank you so much, senior. We're going to move with speed and get to the main issue for the day. And to do that and introduce for us our main speaker, let me invite Mrs. Lorraine Dakwa, who is a lecturer here at the UPSA Law School. Please let's welcome her with a round of applause.
I'm grateful for this opportunity to introduce my senior. So, Mr. David Ofosu-Dorte is the founder and senior partner of AB & David Africa, a Pan-African business law firm with independent offices in multiple African countries. His experience cuts across about 3 decades of development-related consulting and legal advisory roles on diverse matters, including public policy, infrastructure deal structuring, construction contract advice, public-private partnerships, project finance, and the power sector. He has been described as highly regarded and exceptionally strong in ensuring that clients' requirements are delivered. He always brings innovation to issues due to his wide experience internationally, and that was said by Chambers Global 2022. Aside his regular law practice, he is a passionate Pan-Africanist. David co-authored the Private Sector $1 Trillion Africa Investment Framework in support of the AfTA, which has since been adopted by the Africa Union at the Summit of the Heads of State in February 2020. He co-led the Afro Champions team that mobilized private sector action from 28 African countries for private sector action ahead of the start of the AfTA. Between 2021 and the end of 2022, he led a study commissioned by a major development finance institution on how to pilot legislation that will promote export, trading companies in 8 African countries, including Egypt, Tunisia, Morocco, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Nigeria, and Cote d'Ivoire. In addition to law, David also holds a master's degrees in public administration and applied business research, and is also a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Logistics and Transport UK. He has served for many years on the governing council of the Association of Ghana Industries. Between 2013 and 2014, David had the distinguished role to serve as a committee member of the National Competitiveness Council of Nigeria as a non-Nigeria member. David is noted for being a free thinker and promoting several ideas, including the need to rebrand Ghana as the center of the world, a campaign he persisted on until it now appears to have been accepted by the authorities. Ladies and gentlemen, with a standing ovation, let's welcome Mr. David Ofosu-Dorte.
Now, Mrs. Dakwa. Oh, please resume your seat. I wasn't expecting to have people standing up for me, including MPs. The last time I checked, I was rather standing up for politicians when they are coming in. So thank you for that. Having said that, I hope you can see the screen, and I will talk about that shortly. I am honored to be here, and I can imagine there are several categories of persons in this audience. I can identify about 3 or 4 categories of persons. The first group, in my view, will consist of persons who are mainly legal in their thinking and in their schooling, and will therefore be expecting quite a number of quotations of the Constitution, and as to whether the right citations have been made. I'm sorry to disappoint them. This talk will not have such quotations. The second group, I believe, are persons, and I'll be dealing with the last group shortly. The second group, I think, are persons who are just very much interested in Ghana like me, and Senor and many people I know, and are just interested in listening to what it is that we can do about this country. And to them I say, I think those are the things we are going to discuss, and I'll share my thoughts as I feel, just from my heart. But there's a third group. Let me skip the third. They are going to identify 4. Let me skip the third and move to the fourth, rather. That group consists of persons to whom everything is politics, and who are here to identify whether they can see any line as to whether he is NDC or MPP, and whether his thinking and his proposals are skewed towards giving one side of the political divide an advantage over the other. I'm sorry to disappoint you. I have no political ambitions. I have only one allegiance, and that allegiance is to Ghana and Africa. I'm a passionate Pan-Africanist. And for those of you who may know, I tweet almost every morning, and my tweets are mainly about Africa strategy, mindset, and how Africa can go forward. And I don't hold back in criticizing African leaders. So you take me as you find me. But I have no illusions that this nation is so politicized that for many, they look out for, the slides are showing. They look out for every single aspect to try as much as possible to push you to one line or the other. But before I deal with that, let me also touch on journalists. I am aware a few have called me already, including when I was sitting here, who were asking for copies of the speech. I don't know how many of you have seen me before. I have one big weakness. I don't read speeches. I've never read any in my life. I cannot. So if the lecture meant to you the reading of a speech, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I speak from my heart. There will be some few points on the slides. There are points I feel put down, and let's relate to it and let's talk. In my advisory life as a lawyer, I write a lot of opinions that I write when I'm paid. But in exchanging ideas, I like to speak from my heart, where I'm not guarded by the legalese and the principles of what must be said and what must not be said. So there will be no speeches, and I hope that the journalists can take notes in the way that they want. Many of them ask me for copies, as I said. But back to the politicization. There are those who politicize everything. That in one of my tweets, I did say that if George Floyd was a Ghanaian, there would have been less talk about the fact that somebody stepped on his neck for 9 minutes or so and he died. But I would have tried to identify whether he was NDC or MPP. And his death would have had less significance than the fact that the person who killed him belonged to a specific political party, or that he himself belonged to a political party. That's unfortunate. We cannot afford to do that as a society who are far behind and are trying to catch up with the rest of the world. So for the purpose of this lecture, look at me, and I'm just, as it were, quoting somebody who said, I'm not perfect, but I'm a Ghanaian, and that's enough. That's all. All right. Now, the topic I chose when I was asked to speak is, as Senor said, whether the Constitution is a well-crafted, is a fundamental law for our prosperity, or a well-crafted guide leading to our economic doom. I propose to answer the question at the end of the day. But having said that, let me deal with the prosperity first. And prosperity's opposite, in my view, is poverty. I do not intend to go into a lot of definitions. But I look at prosperity or poverty from two angles, one from the national point of view and the other from the individual point of view. Now, the nation, as we all know, as we sit here, cannot pay its debts. It's as simple as that. And therefore, there is no doubt that we are broke. As for the individuals, it depends on whether you have had some investments and you are going to have a haircut or not have a haircut, and whether the haircut is going to make you broke or otherwise. But the story of a friend of mine actually gives a very good idea of what is happening to many people. This is a young friend of mine who happens to be very much partisan and was a constituency leader in one of the parties. But he sees me as a mentor and comes to me every now and then for advice. And he's one of the people I encouraged to actually save. About 3 weeks ago, he sent me audio that he has sent to his father, complaining about how he's the father's only son, and how if something happened to him, the father should not be surprised. He had been kicked out of his house. His wife was having challenges with her work. And the savings he had made with one of the fund managers had amounted to 55,000. After the haircut, or mark-to-market rather, the amount had come down by 20% approximately. And when he tried to access the money, he was asked to wait for 2 weeks. And when he went for 2 weeks, he was asked to wait further. That is a person who learned to save, got $55,000 and became poorer overnight. That is a typical example of how an individual feels regarding whether he is prosperous or not. Now, the World Bank said recently, or the World Bank resident rep is quoted to have said recently, I think as recent as November 2022, that up to a million Ghanaians are sliding back into poverty. So I have no doubt regarding the impact of what is happening to the economy, on the nation, and its effect on the individuals. The question somebody may be asking by now is, what has all that got to do with the Constitution? Everything. Because we live in a society which itself is a defined ecosystem. And law is the most fundamental thing that regulates society. Indeed, the Constitution itself says that it is the most fundamental law of the land, and any law inconsistent with it is void for the inconsistency. And therefore, it is important that we posit our everyday life, including the things that happen to us economically and in our pockets within the Constitution. And therefore, if 1 million people, as said by the World Bank rep, are going to go into poverty, we need to check whether it is possible to trace any of these sources to causative effects under the Constitution. And among other things, I seek to do that. And you will see that my approach to the Constitution is more of its economic and commercial effect on us than the legalese of citations which alienate many people from the society, or from the Constitution, so to speak. Let me deal first with citizenship. And as much as possible, I'll try not to bother about articles and quotations from the Constitution. But citizenship, for the avoidance of doubt, is chapter 3 of the Constitution. It appears that the Constitution has given much freedom to us. And I will do a score of what we get from the Constitution at each point in time. And my score on the freedom for the Constitution is quite high. And I intend to score the Constitution itself as distinct from the users of the Constitution. There are two distinct elements. But having given freedom, it appears that the Constitution users have made it a sin to become a Ghanaian citizen. So much as citizenship rights are enshrined in the Constitution, if you take a look at what the users of the Constitution have done over the years since 1992, it makes it very difficult to see whether there is any benefit of being a citizen. And I propose to do that simply by taking one of many aspects. I listed about 15 things I could do that should show that we are being punished for being citizens. But I zeroed in on just one. And out of the one, I will list between 15 and 20 things that relate to levies. These are things which have been imposed on us to pay. And that is what citizens are supposed to bear. And it is made, we are made to bear by persons who we have voted in accordance with the Constitution and empowered to actually make our lives better. First is National Health Insurance Levy, 2.5%. And it is to provide National Health Insurance Fund to pay for the cost of healthcare services for members of the scheme. To the best of my knowledge, many people have complained about the payment to the extent that many hospitals themselves stopped receiving the cuts. And I'm not talking about MPP's regime. This is perennial. It existed before MPP came to power, and to some extent has continued. Now, when people are levied 2.5 for every expenditure they make, and the health care is also not what they are supposed to expect, then the citizens are being punished for being citizens. But that's just one. Education Trust Fund levy, 2.5%, and it was imposed to ensure that the supply of goods and services made in the country imported for the Education Trust Fund and will assist with financing education in Ghana. If this fund had been managed very well, like other funds had been managed, perhaps it would have assisted in free SHS if it had been invested properly. There are countries around Africa where education is free from beginning to the end. And I don't need to go far. Mauritius is one. Where when you are born, on the day you are born, your birth certificate is registered and a bank account is given to you. And that bank account is 20 rupees. And you are taught how to save the moment you get into your teens. So the savings made by the citizens enable them to fund education from beginning to the end. If anybody were to discuss this in Ghana, I can guarantee it will fall into NDC MPP debate. And we will never move forward with that. But we levy ourselves 2.5, and yet we cannot fund free SHS. And I'm a 100% supporter of free SHS for the avoidance of doubt. I really support it. But funding it and the burden on society is a different question. There's a difference between supporting it and how it is structured. So having said that, if a fund is created, the fund is supposed to increase over the period to be able to do the very things that was intended for. And I've just given an example. COVID-19, I had occasion to send an invoice to a client, and he said, you are the only country which is levying people for COVID-19. Its purpose, 1%, introduced in 2021, is to levy. By the way, national insurance was 2012. The Ghana Education Trust was 2000. Then you have COVID-19, and its purpose was a levy for the supply of goods and services and imports of goods and services into Ghana to raise revenue to support COVID-19 expenditures and related matters. I'm still not sure exactly what those expenditures and related matters are. But everything you buy, you are paying 1% as a citizen. That's the burden you pay. 4, electronic transfer levy. I'll return to this particular subject. Now, we all know what it means. There was too many debates about it, and I won't touch on it anymore, except when I return to it for what I think we could have used it for. Africa Union import levy, 0.2. ECOWAS levy. Africa Union import levy was 2017. ECOWAS levy 2003, 0.5. Energy fund levy, and I have to talk about that, is 1 Ghana pesewa on petrol and kerosene and diesel since 2015. The energy sector owes more than it owed before this fund was introduced. It's very clear. Now, these are the powers given by citizens to managers of the economy to make their life better, and citizens are being asked to pay this. Sanitation and pollution levy, 2021. Its purpose was to levy to help address sanitation issues in the country. 10 Ghana pesewas per liter of petroleum. I'm not so sure whether sanitation issues have been resolved on your way here, but we are being levied for that. And I bet that if we were to speak to those in charge of sanitation, what they will tell you is that their problem is lack of funding. Then we have energy sector levy, which has become ESLA. 20 pesewas per liter on petrol and diesel, 18 pesewas on LPG. 2021 as revised to pay the capacity charge on the energy sector and its bills used by power plants to generate energy. Now, I know that has been removed on industry, but that the industry's cost of power is still very high, based Ghana's products are uncompetitive. Again, the problem is still there. National Fiscal Stabilization Levy 2013 to levy taxes that are imposed on companies and institutions for fiscal stabilization. Is our fiscal regime stable? We all know the answer. It definitely is not stable. Tourism levy to provide funding for tourism and tourism-related activities. 1% payable by a person of a tourism enterprise specified under the Act. So when you go to a restaurant, our tourism is anything. I mean, I hope you know, you can make the judgment yourself. Real estate levy, let me skip it, not everybody pays it. Energy debt recovery. Now this energy debt recovery specifically related to TOR, the Tamoyo refinery. The managers of the state messed up TOR, so to speak, and passed on the burden to us. And to this date, the TOR debt is still there, to the best of my knowledge. Road fund levy. It started, I think, initially at 10 pesos, went to 40, now 48 pesos. And it is support road maintenance. Again, you have the answer, whether the roads are being maintained. Stabilization Recovery Fund, Financial Sector Recovery, National Electrification Scheme Levy, Public Lighting Levy, Export Improvement Levy. That is supposed to go to the Exim Bank and levy on all imports and goods and proceeds for the Ghana Exim Bank, so to promote export. Again, you are the judges yourself. And the response from the room tells me what you feel about this. Then there is advanced eco levy. Let me skip it. The point is, it sounds as if that Ghanaians have no right to earn net income or disposable income. And at any time we seem to be improving in our income, we must be levied with something that will enable us to take the levy and take the money and give it to persons that we queue to elect every 4 years so that they will make our lives better. And they end up making our lives worse. Now, individual corporate and corporate citizens cannot be said to be prospering if every money that they get is taken away from them. My first recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is that we ought to be thinking of an upper limit beyond which governments cannot tax us, imposing it by law, that there must be an upper limit beyond which government cannot impose taxes. And now that I did hear that now that we do have the situation where a private member bill can be introduced, I will recommend to our parliamentarians that this is one area they need to be looking at, that there should be a limit as to the ability of government to levy taxes on us. Otherwise, they will continue increasing their expenditure and indirectly pass on the expenditure to the citizenry who voted them. The worst is that, to the best of my knowledge, none of these levies, absolutely none, has achieved this purpose. So we collect the money, it doesn't achieve its purpose, and we add more. Particular reference will be made to the road fund and the toll recovery fund, both of which were expected to eradicate the problem once and for all. You know the answer. Now, the idea about limiting the government's borrowing, taxes on us, should also come with another idea of limiting the government's ability to borrow. Because how are these expenditures made? They are made by the government either borrowing externally or borrowing from our local market, bonds or T-bills to fund these expenditures, and they end up passing it on to us. Again, I think it is important that we limit the government's ability to borrow. If we do not pass a legislative instrument, a legislative framework to limit the ability to borrow, this problem will not be solved. And there's a reason why I believe so strongly. It is because we live in a society whose culture worships authority and is quite permissive in its attitude. That's a subject I will return to. You cannot divorce culture from constitution. It's very important. The constitution is the supreme law of the land, but culture transcends constitution. I want to repeat that. Constitution is the supreme law of the land, but culture transcends constitution. I am not a supporter of those who actually keep arguing that everything in the constitution should be turned upside down. Strangely enough, much as I'm criticizing these things, I don't believe that the constitution should be amended completely. And when I do the score on what the constitution itself gets, I give the constitution itself a very high mark. My problem is that the culture of the people who use the constitution is such that they find any way to abuse. Now, there is no law in the world, absolutely no law, including the constitution, which is so good enough to prevent evil-minded people from doing that which is wrong. And there is no law in the world so bad which will prevent a good man from doing that which is right. We have to understand that. No matter how good the law is, If you intend to abuse it, you will abuse it. Our constitution is very clear that cabinet should be 19 maximum. But we have found a nice way of distinguishing cabinet from ministers. If we have our mind to do the right thing, the constitution doesn't really matter. We will find a way around it. So no law will limit people who have evil minds from doing that which is wrong. And no law will be so good as to prevent a person who has good intentions from doing that which is right. And that is the reason why I am not a wholesale supporter of amending everything in the Constitution, much as I critique it. We must separate the spirit and letter from the users. And that is the reason why I focus on the culture of the people. If you have a culture which is permissive, which carry, unfortunately, I have to say this about chiefs, a culture of a people who carry chiefs whose forefathers sold them into slavery in Palanquin, that culture of a people are so permissive, right, that it is easy for them to worship politicians much as they worship chiefs. And that culture needs to be related to the Constitution because it creates an ecosystem of a context within which we operate. Also, another thing that is worth considering is those who are actors in this space, especially lawyers, ought to be looking more at how to get interpretations in the Supreme Court on the Constitution regarding whether taxation amounts to an infringement of our economic rights, which are infringed in the Constitution. And I actually think so. I think it does, and I will show that shortly. The Constitution assures us of fundamental human rights and protects us from slavery and forced labor. But the point is, if we tax the people so that enterprises are no more growing, we are indirectly breaching the economic rights of the people and their ability to work, because enterprises are closing down and enterprises cannot expand. I have argued that we need, and that's perhaps my second recommendation, a discriminatory tax system. And that discriminatory tax system is a corporate tax system which rewards persons who, one, in a specified year, maintain the same number of staff, or two, increase the number of staff. Let me explain. If I have 50 employees, and by the end of the year I have maintained the same number of employees or added more, I ought to pay less corporate tax than a person who had a lesser number. And therefore, we all should not be paying 25% corporate tax. It should be discriminatory so as to encourage people to employ. That's one way to solve the employment problem, not to get people to queue at LWAC with the hope that they will find employment. Public sector doesn't create employment. It doesn't. Unless the public sector operates with a private sector mindset, like China has done. So it's important that a mere provision against slavery and forced labor is not made to assume that liberty will necessarily allow prosperity and economic growth. It doesn't. You can be liberal, you can have the liberty, and nevertheless be suffering. Protection from deprivation of property, Article 20, that deals with how our property should not be taken from us. To the best of my knowledge, a large part of the thinking when it comes to this article appears as if it relates only to real estate and to landed property. I hold a view that assets and property has broad definition, and that if I have a bond and I expect interest on the bond, depriving me of the interest for another 1 year amounts to a deprivation of property. As to whether you can prove that in the Supreme Court or not is a totally separate matter. But that is my view, and I cannot be prevented from holding a view. One good thing about America is that they interpret their constitution very broadly, including holding a gun is amounting to freedom of speech. And we need to be testing some of these things. Otherwise, the managers of the economy take any decision and we'll get away with it because we cannot define it in the Constitution. And by the way, I'll be returning to haircut. Haircut is not only an MPP phenomenon, and I will show that shortly. Right. The Constitution's grant of freedom to us, in my view, must also include the right to have access to modern socioeconomic facilities. What is the purpose of a right and a Constitution if people cannot access socioeconomic facilities? Now, you cannot access socioeconomic facilities where many of you or many of us don't have bank accounts, simple bank accounts. A lot of us are so-called unbanked. And for this unbanked category, many people have gone to school writing PhDs on the so-called how to bank the unbanked. Yeah, I can count about 5 friends I know who have written theses on this. It still remains. Yet in this country, we vote every time, and we get voters ID. 16 million people are on the voters roll at my last check, but less than 5 million people have bank accounts in the whole nation, if my figure is right. Yeah, I think it's less than 5 million. 4. A nation where more people who are 18 and above can vote, and there are 16 million, and only 4 million have bank accounts, needs to examine its conscience. The leaders of the society need to examine their conscience. They have to wake up at 2 a.m. and think, because it appears we stopped thinking long ago. Now, what is different from converting voters' ID into an automatic bank account with a zero account? That is what Mauritius does. Your birth registration gives you your bank account. It doesn't require magic. There's nothing scientific about it. It can be done almost instantly, just at the hospitals or at the polling station. And this is neither MPP or NDC. How do you call it? It doesn't favor any of them. It gives them the chance to actually collect more taxes from us. Now, instead of doing that, we have rather done things which are actually, in my view, very detrimental to the very banking sector in which we want confidence. Our Bank of Ghana, and I'll touch on Bank of Ghana also shortly, talks about the need to increase savings culture. I have my own theory about savings culture, but that is for another day. But you can't increase savings culture by destroying confidence in the financial sector. Now, how have we done that? Let's deal first with e-levy before I return to the other aspects. Since you had so many people beginning to use Momo, I would have thought one of the fastest way to bring the unbanked into the banking system was to have asked the banks to turn every single Momo account into a bank account automatically. Your telephone number becomes your bank account. After all, that telephone number has a national ID supporting it, and you have registered. Again, overnight, excluding registration of voter ID cards or whatever, we could have had bank accounts and increase the number of bank accounts to close to the 16. With that bank accounts, you then make sure that every Momo is indexed to a bank account. I will not have done the e-levy. I will tell you what I will have done. And if the authorities want to take this recommendation, they may. In Ghana, they don't speak to you until you wear NDC or MPP t-shirt. It is not because some of us lack ideas. And some of us have put ideas in the public domain which have been bought, including the center of the world. But I will return to that. Having said that, you see, at times I wonder why Christians go to church, especially Christian politicians, and I have seen some sitting in front of me. Jesus Christ was told by his disciples that somebody was healing somewhere but was not healing in the name of Christ. And he said, he who is not against us is for us. In Ghana, the politicians have an opposite maxim, yet they go to church. He who is not wearing a t-shirt is against us. They assume that so far as you are not wearing their t-shirt, you are against them, and therefore you have no idea whatsoever. And both of them do the same thing. So some people like me, both have branded him as belonging to the opposite. Anyway, so the unbanked could have been brought into the banking sector almost instantly, either through Momo or through voter ID. We have not done that. But what have we done to the banking sector? Let's start from the PNDC before the Constitution. Under the Rawlings regime of PNDC, anybody who had more than 20 cedis had a problem. It sounds ridiculous, but that was it at that time. My father's house was surrounded. If you had 20 cedis, you had a problem. And a lot of people were investigated, etc. Many people kept their money under their beds. Mattresses in those days became the safes. For those of you who don't know, those who sell safes in Ghana, their sales shot up around July to December last year. Many people were keeping money at home and changing dollars and keeping it at home. We almost went back to that. But after the PNDC, during the NDC, something was introduced called the Financial Sector Improvement Program, FinSIP, where the financial sector was to be cleaned once and for all, and we will not return to debt and loans which were in default. We went back. The financial sector had challenges so much with the dollar rising that I will never forget Valentine's Day of 2014. Governor Wampa, and I've said this several times, I make no apologies. He issued a letter which is perhaps the most disastrous letter I have ever seen. attempting to ban the use of foreign exchange, and many people lost a lot of money overnight. A lot of people have forgotten that. It killed confidence in the financial sector. So we started from BNDC, from the 20 cities, in fact, from AFRCD, BNDC, FinSip, Governor Wampa. Then we had a banking collapse between 2015 and 2017. Again, confidence in the financial sector went down. Then there was NDC haircut one. I said I was going to return to this haircut. Yes, NDC also did haircut. And they did a haircut for the banking sector only. So banks were negotiated with and they took some haircut. Then this time we have haircut 2 under MPP, which is banks and others. Are we going to have next time a head cut?
This one is a haircut.
It's a haircut, but if you don't take it, we'll be getting to a head cut. Now, is it real? Mark my words. Watch 2027 to 2029. If we continue doing what we are doing, we will be more broke than we are now. Why can I predict that? And for those of you who don't know, I make predictions. And I have a very high sense of accuracy of predictions. I don't make prophecies, I make predictions. I do that every year at an event called Crystal Ball. And I have a very high accuracy rate. Those who attend know that. The history is very clear. Anytime you are declared the fastest growing economy, 5 to 7 years, you'll be back to IMF. You can check the records. And I have tweeted about this. I don't blame IMF for that. You will notice that it encourages us to borrow so much and misbehave that we walk to IMF, which is a lender of last resort, to be disciplined. In other words, we admit our indiscipline. So, in my view, the economy will stabilize by 2024, 2025, but by 2027, 2029, if we do what we are doing, we will be borrowing much more and we will need more salvation. Directive principles of state policy. That actually creates objectives under the Constitution for each citizen to play a role in the economy and for the nation to protect our resources. There has been a whole argument as to whether it is justiciable or otherwise, but now the Supreme Court has settled the matter that it is justiciable. But let's look at how the managers of the economy since the 1992 Constitution have dealt with our assets. We sold our shares in Anglo Gold Ashanti entirely. Those shares were appropriated for us by Kutu Achampong, 55%. We didn't have those shares in the first place. He nationalized it. And after the shares got value, we sold all of it. We sold Ghana Airways, and we sold Ghana Airways at the time we were broke. We sold Ghana Telecom at that time to balance the budget by $150 million only. Now, at the last time I heard, we have 17 more enterprises that we have listed to sell. That was just announced by the Minister for Public Sector Enterprises or something like that. I don't know the list of the enterprises. But the sale is continuing. Now, I'll compare that to China shortly as how we protect enterprises or state resources as against that of other countries. I took a look at the constitution of China, Rwanda, USA, and Singapore as a comparison as to what makes these nations progress. Can anything be traced to the constitution and their culture? Now, you will notice that under Chapter 7, the citizens who have complained about thus far are given the right to vote. But it appears the citizens get powerless immediately after they vote. And they have no power. Again, unfortunately, 2 of my parliamentarian friends are here. I can see them. And I think there are more. Parliament is supposed to be representative of the people. It appears the executive gets its way irrespective of whatever. And please, by the executive, this has existed since 1993. In fact, when we had the 137, many were those who thought, for once, somebody was going to check the executive. Nothing changed. So clearly, it appears the right to vote is all the right that the citizens have been left with. Nothing more, by the way we behave. Now, having said that, we have also turned elections into a very, very expensive enterprise. The slide shows how much we have spent on the Electoral Commission and voting over the period 2000 to 2020. And you can see the increases in numbers, jumping particularly from, looked a bit stable from 2000 to 2008, jumped a bit to 2012, 2016 jumped significantly, and 2020 jumped slightly significantly. Now, in all this, we've increased the number of constituencies. We keep increasing them, and that I will touch on also. And the only referenda worth note that I remember is a recent referenda to actually divide the country into more regions, which I will touch on again. We have no Swiss option here. Perhaps we need to be considering a Swiss option. What is Swiss option? In Switzerland, almost everything goes into a referendum. And therefore, the Electoral Commission, for want of a better word, quote and unquote, is not waiting until 4 years when the people come to vote and go. Almost every decision. The last time I was in Zurich, the question of whether or not it should increase the minimum wage is by vote. And it's a system is so organized that on your way to work, you vote. By 5 o'clock, the people decided that minimum wage should not be increased. Finished. In Zurich, the mayor wanted to expand a certain road. There was a referendum. And he decided that the road should remain, that the traffic is okay. Because you cannot commit public expenditure to that. And these are things we need to learn from. Rwanda has a similar provision, which I will touch on. So we just keep charging the expenses. And the countries we admire, we keep saying, the last I checked is over $200 million we are spending on elections. The countries we admire several times our GDP, with huge foreign reserves, and 3% of global trade. Singapore is smaller than Accra. They spend only $2.5 million on elections. $2.5 million, simple. That's how much they spend on elections. And for the avoidance of that, Singapore is not a communist country or a one party, it's a multi-party country. It is a lot that has to do with our culture. If there is any entity that has benefited from the Constitution, it is the political parties. They have benefited more than any. They are the biggest beneficiaries. Theoretically, they were supposed to galvanize ideas so that our collective prosperity will be ensured. However, Mr. Chairman, so far as I'm concerned, the political parties have become a duopoly of disunity, leading us to our economic doom by polarizing everything. Chapter 8 of the Constitution creates the office of the President. There's been a lot of debate as to whether the term of office is okay or not, whether it should be prolonged. In fact, one president during his last speech actually said we should prolong or extend the term. I totally disagree. My main concern at this stage, though, has to do with the appointments the president is given power to give. And if you look at Article 70 and align it with 195, you will see that he has power to keep just appointing and increasing the public sector as much as they can. Added to what I know Professor Abuchi was just talking about on Joy FM on my way here, has to do with bringing bills to Parliament. Every bill you bring to Parliament has a cost effect. And in Rwanda's constitution, I think Article 89 or so, I have to check, you cannot bring a bill to Parliament, Rwanda, without justifying whether the cost that it creates is actually being provided for, or whether the bill is intended to reduce the cost. It's a provision in the Rwanda constitution. So you just don't create bills. Here we create bills, and because the executive has its way, we keep adding on to the cost. So there are limits. Indeed, the president and parliament can scratch each other's back and increase their emoluments. We all know that. I don't need to go. Under the constitution of the US, parliament can only increase its salaries and emoluments if it is for the next parliament and not the incumbent parliament. So they have kept their allowances and emoluments very stable because you cannot increase it for the next parliament. So is the president. The president cannot increase his or her emoluments unless it's for the next term. And again, those are things we need to learn from. So my view about whether we should extend the president term or not is very extreme. It's an impractical recommendation, but just to give that impractical recommendation so that we understand that as much as possible we should stay where we are. My impractical recommendation is that given the chance, our president term should be 1 year and not more. Why do I say this impractical recommendation? It will operate like how Rotary clubs operate. In the first year, we will elect 2 presidents, 1 incumbent and 1 in waiting. Every year, we go to referendum and elect another one. So whenever you are incumbent, you know the next person is waiting. it is not long enough for you to finish any project, and therefore you must continue the whole project, and it's not long enough for you to mess up the economy. 1 year is enough, and they become ceremonial. Is that in practice? Yes, Switzerland has it. It's a committee, and every year, one person takes turn to be president. There was a time of a turn of a president whose wife had a baby, and he decided that he didn't want to be president that year. It's not possible in Ghana. So we should either keep it or reduce it. All right. Having said that, let's deal with cabinet, which I talked about earlier. And I don't want to go into the legalese of minimum of 9, 10, and 19. Those are legal issues that I don't, and I'm a lawyer, I understand them very well. You can manage this country adequately with 15 ministers. 15. I have no doubt about that, and I can prove to anybody that you can. Now, one of the faults of the Constitution is the creation of deputies. It's one of the recommendations in the Constitution, which, as far as I'm concerned, was inserted for Jerry Rawlings. And therefore, if you made a comment that Jerry Rawlings passed, then we should deal with it. If there are a few things I will change in the Constitution. I agree that the Constitution doesn't need to be amended that drastically. So, Prof, I agree with you largely to that extent. I don't believe we need deputy ministers. I don't believe that. We don't. We can stay with ministers. A lot of them are my friends. I'm not taking their daily bread from them, and I'm not talking about current deputy ministers. I'm saying that a nation which is seeking to use these resources at this moment in time can do with ministers alone. Because our Constitution is so permissive, and we have a situation where our people basically will agree with anything that the executive does. Now, if we have to amend that part, I will highly recommend not just creating a separation of cabinet and ministers, but just limiting it to cabinet, and that there shall be no minister other than cabinet. Every minister should be a cabinet minister, and we should set an upper limit and end there. We can cut costs. Council of State. I can see what the giggling is about. To me, it is a silent advisor whose role may not be seen by many. And I don't have any doubt with the reputation of people there that they do advise. But this is perhaps the only quotation I will make relating to Constitution, and I will read all. It's from Dr. Raymond Atuguba's recent book on the Constitution, From the Garden of Eden to 2022. And I quote, he says the distinction between situations when the president must act, quote, in consultation with or in accordance with at the advice of the bodies of the Council of State in the course of exercising his powers and appointment is quite blurred. The Supreme Court decided in the case of the Ghana Bar Association and others versus Attorney General that the advice given to the president by the institutions such as the Council of State or the Judicial Council are merely advisory opinions and are thus not binding on the president. The fallout of this interpretation provided by the Supreme Court is an enhanced concentration of decision-making power in the executive president, who already wields extensive powers under the Constitution. This decision, some have argued, is not in sync with the tenets of good governance, which will require that the overwhelming powers of the appointment of the president are minimized. I agree with Atuguba's view on that. But having said that, why set up an institution whose advice we don't need? What is the purpose of a whole institution whose advice we will not take? And we spend so much money on it. Now, it gets even worse that when we increase regions, we increase the number of people in the Council of State and go through elections for advice which we will not take. My view and my recommendation is that, one, it's about time the Council of State, if we have to amend the Constitution, make the advice to the president public, except where the advice relates to national security matters. And we have to define the ambit of national security within which the advice cannot be made public. Two, Parliament must vote if it is demonstrated that after advising the president on 2 occasions, the president refused. That way, we will put in a fetter, and we will indirectly compel the person to take good advice. I have asked a question. the Council of State, if anybody knows here, please forgive me and advise me. The Council of State advise on whether we should go to IMF or not. And the timing when we said we won't go to IMF, I don't have an idea. If they did, I don't know. But I would have thought that prior to getting into a haircut situation, it would have been good for the elders of the state to have given the advice. I don't have any doubt that they did. But the citizens have no way of knowing. And these are some of the things we need to be thinking about. The legislature, I hope they don't call me for or the contempt, the privileged committee. But I think it is the most failed of the organs of the Constitution. Completely failed. I've already talked about the fact that even 137 didn't change anything. They are supposed to hold the executive in check. And I don't need to explain anymore that. But we keep increasing the number to 275 now. And the emoluments keep increasing. Did they get their police escorts when they were asking for? I'm not so sure whether they did. But all these are charged to the consolidated fund. Now, the strange thing about the parliament is that, for me, the most important committee has been left out of parliament. But I will deal with that. How did we get to the 275? Because after every 10 years, we do census, and the electoral commission, then through some consultation, do the demarcation. America had that, but we must learn the mistakes of others. In 1929, America decided that you cannot continuously be enforcing a provision in the American Constitution where every 30,000 people had to have one representative. And rather, they should fix an upper limit on the number. And the number should be the basis to divide the number of people who are represented. And after all, communication was improving, and therefore it's easier to deal with constituents. So since 1929, the American Congress has remained at 437. And it doesn't matter how much the population increases. You have to now work the number backwards. If we continue going where we are going, I don't know when number of parliamentarians that we are going to, keep getting. But let's look at the committees of parliament. And again, for the avoidance of doubt, the distinction, to the best of my knowledge, and my MPs are here, they can correct me, is that they have select committees and standing committees and ad hoc committees as and when necessary. Select committees are those which are mimicking the ministries of the government. And the standing committees are the committees which are there, irrespective of the government, essentially. And ad hoc committees as and when necessary. Let's look at our committees in Parliament. Appointments, business of Parliament, Committee on Selection, Finance, Gender, Assurances, Government Assurances, the House, etc., etc., etc. I have looked through, and I have said this several times. I cannot find any committee on the economy. To the best of my knowledge, our Parliament has never had any committee on the economy. Please don't confuse finance with the economy. There's a difference between spending money and planning. What we have done is to combine the buyer with the payer. Now, there is a small fault with the Constitution which leads to this. It is the creation of the National Development Planning Commission without making it a ministerial function. The idea was to enhance the power. However, it has had the adverse effects as a result of our culture. But having said that, my key point is that our Parliament, to the best of my knowledge, have never had any committee that examines the economy as distinct from finances. And we confuse the two. Now, let's look at the countries we admire. UK has a committee on the economy, focusing on rural economy. They have a committee that looks at business, energy, and industrial strategy. In 2015, at a public lecture I did at the British Council, I advocated for the creation of a Ministry of Business Development and made this same argument that the failure to have a committee on the economy in Parliament is one reason why businesses are taxed to extinction. And I wrote and sent copies to both parties. It was about that and my campaign for Center of the World, which I'd been doing since 2011. Incidentally, the MPP took it and actually created a Ministry of Business Development in their first term and abandoned it in the second term. So, to the best of my knowledge, Parliament is not looking at business. Now, in UK, when there was an intention to sell AstraZeneca, the Committee on Business had 254 sittings, checking with business and society as to whether or not a single asset should be sold. That's what Parliament representing the people should do. In the United States, there is a joint committee on the economy. In Rwanda, they have a committee on the economy and trade. Now, Articles 1, 6, 7, 9, 10, 11, and 11 of the China Constitution actually enjoins the state to use productive resources of the state and put it in the state and make sure it is productive. When we go and borrow from China Development Bank, CDB, and are underwritten by Sino-Shore, they are all government entities. China Railway is a government entity. They won all the stadium contracts in Qatar. And if China is becoming, or it is the second biggest economy, and I predict it to overtake the US by 2030, not 2050 as many think, it is because they have utilized their state resources. I have already said how we have sold Anglo Gold and all, and we are going to sell 17 more. Now, by the way, I'm also not an advocate of simply retaining them when they are making losses. It's our culture. It makes us misuse assets because our presidents will appoint the board, and instead of leaving the board to appoint the CEO, he will appoint the CEO, and the CEO and the board are always arguing because they both have assets. Yet, we have a company's code, and these are SOEs under the company's code, and the company's code has no relevance. I want to repeat, no law is so good as to allow a person with evil mind to do the wrong thing, as to prevent a person with evil mind to do the wrong thing. The law is there. Ghana, we don't like laws. We have all the laws. All right. So I talked about China. In our case, under the Diversity Implementation Committee, PDNDC Law 326, we sold 80 enterprises even before the Constitution came into force. Now, PNDC Law 326 for the avoidance of doubt was passed in 1993, even though the enterprises were sold from 1986. So the law was retroactive, as it were. Then we passed at 461 to convert statutory corporations into companies. And when we finished, we behave as if they are still statutory corporations. Okay, let's move to the judiciary. My comment there, Mr. Chairman, is very simple. The Supreme Court needs an upper limit. Many people have said this. I'm not the only person saying that. Now, when I say upper limit, I mean the number of justices at the Supreme Court. There is something more important, which is the reason that has been made, and I want to emphasize it, why we need that. Anybody who knows judges will tell you that the older they get, the more matured and the more knowledgeable they become. So at 70, a Supreme Court judge is actually at his prime, now beginning to even mature more. But that's when we retire them. And we don't just retire them, but they are part of the people whose cost we continue to bear after they have retired. Why do we actually retire mature wine and continue to incur the cost? Why don't we extend the age limit so we can benefit from them whilst bearing the cost? And I'm a strong advocate that we will have the benefit of their wisdom for the length in which they stay there, plus saving the cost, and by limiting the number. After all, the American Supreme Court has only 9 judges, and it's always 9. Now, this chart you see is not limited to the Supreme Court or the judiciary, and I did that deliberately. It actually includes foreign affairs and the Ministry of Justice. But actually, it's a chart which shows between 1995 and now how much money we spend on people who have retired. And you will see that from 2005, it started shooting up. And by 2020, it went astronomical. That is how much we are spending on people whose wisdom we are not actually taking. And these are some of the things we need to take a second look at. Then there's a chapter 13 on Ministry of Finance. As I indicated, that ministry is quite a powerful ministry. And it's combining economic management with finance and imposing taxes on us. And that has been the case since 1993. So it's not about the current minister. And I've already explained that the part of the challenges come from how National Development Planning Commission was constituted. And we need to take a second look at that and either make it a cabinet ministry again as one of the main, just one of the few changes in the constitution that we may need to make, or make it practical that we have a Ministry of Economic Planning. I think Jambafo was recently appointed, and again, that ministry I don't think is anymore during the first term of this current government. But I did not feel their presence as an economic planning ministry, so that finance ministry will actually be responsible for expenditure disbursements. Under Article 181, loans can be taken. Essentially, all that we need is parliamentary approval. I'm still not sure that there is any loan that came to Parliament and was rejected. I heard some 500 million recently or so. I'm not so sure. If it was, we wouldn't be where we are. We wouldn't always be incurring debt. So I don't, as we give Parliament an excuse for that. The public debt keeps increasing. Under Article 183, the central bank, this is revolutionary and difficult for them to do. And I had occasion to tweet about this. That even if a theory becomes outdated, it takes boldness to actually depart from it. And especially when we mismanage our economy and go to IMF, it will be very difficult to depart from it unless the IMF itself has departed from it. So you will notice that for 50 years, Bank of Ghana has been looking for macroeconomic stability. We've all heard this word. We always, with fiscal and monetary, macroeconomic stability, we get it and we become unstable again. Inflation targeting. The inflation the last time I checked was about 40 something or so. We've been targeting it. We've not been succeeding. Monetary policy increases. We've increased 5 times this year and the inflation hasn't come down. Banks have collapsed and I gave a retinue of banks which collapsed. I've already gone through that slide. And killing the confidence in the banking sector. In fact, what we have done with the haircut is killing confidence in savings. The same old story occurs all the time. And cost of doing business becomes so high over the period. Maybe it's about time Bank of Ghana begin to think whether or not these traditional policies work. I hold a view, and I've granted an interview on TV on this, that I don't believe monetary policy increases in Ghana is an effective tool to manage inflation. At all, I don't. And the reasons are very simple. Because we are not the type of people who simply react as a result of increases in lending, because many people don't have access to lending from the banks. Otherwise, it's almost impossible to have a situation where monetary policy rate has increased 4-5 times and the inflation is actually going up. So it's about time we need to rethink. And by the way, Ghana is not the only entity which is looking at this. China and Turkey, over the last 2.5 years, or 2 years actually, have refused to increase monetary policy rate even though inflation was going up. Interestingly, both of them are now beginning to record a lesser inflation than the traditional countries like the US. China's inflation is actually going down. They refuse to increase. In fact, China actually reduced its monetary policy rate. So at times, it is important to think about whether what we are doing is actually, and it's important because the Bank of Ghana is also a constitutional body. Public services keeps increasing. One of them is the National Center for Civic Education. I mean no harm, but besides elections, I have not heard of any education which is coming from that sector. Maybe I'm ignorant, and I'll take my word back if it is not the case. Maybe they are not receiving the budget, but I'll be happy to know what the center is supposed to be doing. Are they focusing our mindset on self-reliance? What exactly is the center supposed to be doing besides elections? Shraj, depending on who is in charge, an institution can become powerful under the Constitution. We all remember Emil Short. And interestingly, I think I did hear Professor Bochi talk about that this morning. Everybody respected Shraj. But look at what the managers of the Constitution have done. Now, the chart you see shows Shraj, Iyoko, Office of Special Prosecutor. Article 218, Section 3A of Iyoko, and Section 2A of OSP all made the same provision. And I go on and on and on. When it comes to remedying for recovery, you find it in all the 3 institutions. When it comes to the power to question subjects and investigate them, you find it in all the 3. When it comes to bringing proceedings in court, you find it all the 3. Essentially, we are just creating institutions to add to the public purse and come back and tax the people. Decentralization. This is one country which keeps cutting districts. Recently, I was at a lecture at the International Conference Center organized by the Ministry of Lands. and I spoke on town planning because I happen to have had the privilege to be the one who drafted the new town planning legislation, the Land Use and Special Planning Act. And the chief, incidentally, happened to be a former president of the House of Chiefs, asked a question regarding how come that, notwithstanding the law, planning is haphazard. And I said, with all due respect, Nana, I will send the question back to you. You are the chiefs who go demanding for creation of districts. And when districts are created, it's in consultation with the Electoral Commission. Electoral Commission manages people above 18. Nobody checks whether they are orthophoto maps, whether they are planners. At a certain point, when Ghana had about 150 districts, we had only 70 qualified planners. You can check. How do you expect adequate planning when you are creating districts? Because during the election, somebody comes to you and he promises you a region and you give his blessing, even though chiefs are supposed to be non-partisan. So a society where we put pressure to divide us becomes very difficult to understand. We created an ecosystem that destroys us. In fact, in the recent election for the creation of the regions, I saw NDC and MPP people coming together to fight for the creation of regions. In other words, the only time we united was to divide us. They united so they could divide us into regions. Now, when you create a region, you actually are needing a new regional hospital, a new national house of chiefs, new regional administration. You are adding to the public purse. I've given you the reference to the Rwandan constitution, which says don't bring any bill to parliament if that bill is going to increase cost unless you can show where the revenue is coming from or unless it is reducing cost. We keep increasing cost. Creation of districts is not a very simple thing. What is different if instead of, for example, dividing northern region into 3, we decided to build a big hospital in each of the areas we divided? And the truth is, after dividing this, we've not found the funds for them anyway. Nothing has changed. So it's about time we took a second look at this. The worst is that fiscal decentralization we are not doing. Fiscal decentralization is letting the money go to the districts so that they can spend. We are not sending the money there. So we are just dividing them for cosmetic purposes. So if you look at districts in 1957, we had 58. 71, 65. We added 7. And 1988 PNDC law, we went to 108, we added 43. Then the constitution came into force. Then we added 2 immediately. Then 2003, we added 28 to 138. 2007, we added 32 to make it 170. 2012, we added 46 to make it 216. 2018, we added 38 to make it 254. 2019, we added 6 to make it 260. And 2020, 1 more to make it 261. Almost coterminous with MPs. Which explains why the ambulances was easy to distribute to constituencies. It's important that we recognize that these are costs. And please remember, I started by showing you the levies imposed on citizens for these costs. That is why I started with that, so that I show you where the cost centers come from. When they are arguing in parliament, they are arguing to let you pay. Regions, you were 557, 60 we became 7, 78, 82, 9, 83, 10, and 2018, 16. The Constitution, which gives this power, also makes a provision that you can merge districts and regions. None of them has been merged. And as I speak, some are still lobbying for further division. New highway administration. I recently had occasion to address Ghana Highway Authority, and I saw new regional directors, plenty. Each of them will require a car, etc. Public lands is supposed to be protected. The chaos, I don't want to go there. But there is a provision 264 which guarantees tenure of office. You can check this record. I may be wrong, but I don't know one executive secretary of National Lands Commission since 1993 who has finished his term. They've all been removed. Maybe the current one will finish his. All of them get removed. That's an independent commission under the Constitution. I want to repeat, no law is adequate enough for a person who intends to do the wrong thing from doing it. All right. Yet land is a factor of production. And it is one reason businesses find it difficult. When the World Bank used to do the Doing Business Index, land was always one of the most difficult areas if you took a look at the challenges. Natural resources, the less said, the better. I've already talked about how we've sold Anglo Gold and all those. But that aside, I did hear Bank of Ghana is buying gold recently. I agree 100% with that policy. It's a very good policy. However, I thought the Constitution says that all natural resources are for the people and the president holds it in trust. And therefore, if the gold is already for us, why is Bank of Ghana buying that which is already for us? Shouldn't the gold be held in trust somewhere already for us, that we should just collect and keep a Bank of Ghana? It means that unlike China, who protected their natural resources, we dissipate our natural resources. The only exception so far I've seen, incidentally, happened under this government, which is bauxite and iron ore, where there are laws 709, I think so, 779 and 798, to ban bauxite and iron ore exports. Even though, to the best of my knowledge, they have not been banned yet. The law is passed in futuro, as it were, but at least it's an attempt. So when it came to gold, which is ours, but by the way, there are countries in this world when if you find gold, it's your gold. If you find gold in America, it's your gold. If you find oil, it's your oil. And they are not broke. We, who when you find gold, is for the government. The government is now looking for money to buy gold. Strange. And that's the constitution we operate. Chieftaincy, I've already said, to the best of my assessment, has become a major problem. Commissions of inquiry, the Constitution makes provision for that. So I took a check on the commissions which have been set up. I didn't see any on business. I cited the example of UK's AstraZeneca earlier, but I saw one on Ayawasu elections, judgment debt. I will need more than 5 minutes, for sure. But I will speed up. Ayawasu elections, judgment debt, and I don't know whether it's privilege of appearing twice before the Judgment Debt Commission. And I told Justice Yawapao that nobody is going to implement his report. And actually nobody implemented. Yeah, I told him, it was public hearing, I told him about a minister who actually added $300,000 to a recommendation that I had made, openly. This is public information. Yeah, I made a recommendation and the minister thought that the person should add $300,000 more. And that minister was so pursuing a previous regime, but yet he decided to add more. How he got the money or whether it was a favor, I don't know. But he called me to ask, why am I giving a recommendation and not adding some to the person who is claiming it? And I asked him, what will happen if 10 years we are all summoned to answer this question? Exactly 5 years. I was summoned for the Judgment Debt Commission. Anyway, so it's about time we set up commissions to check the economy. What takes us to IMF 17 times? I would expect Parliament to push for such a commission to be set up, so that we don't get into a situation where we keep going. Now, all these things occur, Mr. Chairman, because we have a permissive ecosystem which allows users of the Constitution to abuse it and create cost escalations and are not punished for the infractions, except a few when they are out of power, and citizens are burdened as a result. Now, an ecosystem consists of diverse things, and soon I will get arithmetical. It consists of the people and their behavior and their culture. Their attitudes, whether they are power distance people who believe others should be more powerful than them, the law that regulates them, the historical issues, for example, were they a colony, did they have military regime, and how they respond to future events. To do this assessment, I decided to do a quick assessment of how the Constitution itself and how the managers have performed, and I'll give them a score. And I simply took the Legatum Prosperity Index, on which Ghana scored 99, was on number 99 out of 146. Now, I am not going to use that score. I'm going to use my score as the speaker for the day. Safety and security, where the Constitution allows us to prevent conflicts, etc. I score 7, and 7 is a high mark. Although we have hodgepodge of flashpoints. Personal freedom, I score 9. The Constitution has got copious provisions, and to the best of my knowledge, it has been highly protected There are a few infractions every now and then. Governance pillar, which protects checks and balances and restrains the government from doing excessive things when it comes to corruption, etc. My score is 2. And I think that's a generous score. Now, the next one is social capital, which is a pillar that checks personal relationships, institutional trust, etc., and civic participation. My score is 3. Now, investments, the environment which encourages people to invest and have ready access for investment. My score is 4. I give the reasons below there. Enterprise conditions, where it looks at the degree to which regulations enable businesses to start and expand. My score is 2. If you have a situation where businesses are taxed all the time, they cannot expand. And that too is quite a generous score. And as we know, access to capital and cost of capital is quite high. We even forget cost of power. Recently, I heard that Ghana is one of the leading countries when it comes to cost of power domestically. Yes, that's true. But we are number 16 when it comes to cost of power to industry. And that makes us uncompetitive in an AFCFTA world. Infrastructure facilities compared to other African countries, I give 6. Then economic quality pillars, which looks at how we are able to generate wealth individually, I give 1. Initially, I actually gave 0. Then I took a look at it and gave 1. Living conditions and quality of life, shelter, basic services, I give 2. Health and access to health services as availability, I give 6. Education and pillars, I've already told you that I support free SHS, notwithstanding the challenges that has to be overcome and has to be properly funded. I give 7. Natural environment, where we protect our natural resources for posterity, I give 2. We all know the story of Galamsey, etc., and therefore I don't need to justify that. Having said that, the score on my sheet, average, for the Constitution itself is quite high. But the score for the users of the Constitution was 4.5. In other words, the users of the Constitution have performed abysmally, even though the Constitution itself is well crafted for our prosperity. The users appear to be heading in the wrong direction. Now let's go mathematical. For a ecosystem to thrive, for us to achieve the prosperity we all desire, it must take a look at the contemporary events. And contemporary events include how opposition oppose governments, just for opposition's sake, or with constructive criticism. How demand for new regions are made by chiefs, etc. How allegations of vote rigging will end up in court instead of any court decision as to whether we can interpret the Constitution as to whether our economic rights are being abused. Those are internal conditions that create the ecosystem. External one would include global price hikes, Ukraine war, shortage of wheat and iron rods, dollar pressure, some of which we always use as an excuse as to why we have challenges and hiccups. And every single finance minister since the Constitution has said the problem is from external shocks. If we have a Constitution which we cannot implement to withstand external shocks, and we have cited this so many times, then we have a problem. I once had a tweet where I said that even the enterprises we privatized ended up becoming bankrupt. A society where enterprises in public hands and private hands go bankrupt needs to re-examine the mindset of the elite. So mathematically, if I were to represent this, contemporary excuses, which we give, will be CE, plus divided citizenry, which I started with, everything is NDC, MPP, minus absence of a focused strategy. We don't have. We have moved from, I will touch on that. We've moved from one strategy to the other. If you add a contemporary excuses we give to divided citizenry and you don't have a focused strategy, you will get economic doom, which is the topic for my discussion, posted in the Constitution. And the economic doom will be sped up. However, if we have strategy and it's focused, it helps. For example, when I started making the argument about the center gonna be the center of the world, the only person who used to talk about it was a certain gentleman in Tema who was using it for also other purposes. And I was surprised to hear that this argument actually came up at a PNDC cabinet meeting. Ghana is actually the last land that the Greenwich Meridian goes through before it enters the sea. And it's exactly 5 degrees above the equator. I've seen some advert on TV, CNN, where they say we are on the equator. We are not on the equator. We are 5 degrees above the equator. But there's no land at that intersection point. It is the only point where merchant navy staff come to park, as it were, come to dock and perform ceremonies, because it's the only place you can be in the eastern and the western hemisphere at the same time. I have several videos, you can check them on YouTube, as to the power of location branding, which cannot be challenged. I wrote a whole paper to a president who didn't read it. Now, in the period of the Constitution, we borrowed over $100 million from the World Bank to implement a gateway concept, to turn Ghana into a gateway. And I have said over and over, if the Lord puts you at the center and you want to be the gate, you have a problem. You have a big cultural problem. Now, hopefully, the right thing will be done. And nobody has spoken to me. The government has been using it. Nobody has spoken to me, or to the best of my knowledge, some of the people who propagated this. Kojakoto Boatin, for example, of CTFM, was one of the people that we were pushing this. I mean, we talked about it everywhere, printed T-shirts, etc. But it doesn't matter. The fact that it is being done gradually is enough. On a different lecture, we can talk about its power and what we can do. But from the gateway, we moved to Vision 2020, we moved to GPRS 1 and 2, Better Ghana, and now Ghana Beyond Aid. Now, the Constitution throughout this period, Mr. Chairman, has become a perfect guide for the duopoly of political parties, as I said, who undermine each other to take over, pursuant to which they incur more debt for the country, and in real terms make the people poorer, whilst each side claim to be the only solution to the problem they both created. That is the situation where the managers of the Constitution have put us. How do we get out? I believe the mathematical presentation of that is where the ecosystem is the denominator, and the numerator will be contemporary events, because those events will still occur and we don't control them. Leadership choices, which we need to make, but because our leadership don't make the right choices all the time and they make political choices. If you want to know how leadership decisions are made in this country, and there's no exception, check, there's a 3-step procedure. 1, will he give me an advantage over my political opponent? 2, will he make the decision maker himself enhance his political career? 3, can I justify it by some other rational means without making reference to the first 2? These are the 3-point criteria by which decisions are made. And so therefore the decisions are made not made on leadership choices for the posterity that we promise under the Constitution to save, neither for the living nor for the yet to be born. So contemporary events, Ukraine war, we don't control. Inflation, we don't control. In fact, IMF has said there will be a recession of a third of the world next year. So contemporary events plus leadership choices plus citizens' response. In an economy or ecosystem of the type we have, citizens must respond properly and depoliticize themselves. Over the ecosystem, we get to a speedy attainment of prosperity. And I chose to talk about the economic doom or prosperity. So what is this report card? You can see it. Debt exchange, restructuring, 1 million people going into poverty, haircut. Hopefully we won't have a haircut in future. It appears that if we stick to what we are doing, Mr. Chairman, we will face the economic doom. But having said that, Mr. Chairman, I started without the necessary salutations. And I'm not oblivious that I failed to wish you the necessary salutations at this time of the year. But I did that deliberately. It is because I know it is customary at this time of the year to wish everybody a happy new year and a prosperous new year. But when I started taking a look at this Constitution, I realized that 1, prosperity is actually a constitutional issue. And prosperous new year comes from the prosperity, or relates to the prosperity. And to wish you a happy new year happiness, not necessarily as a result of prosperity, but people tend to relate the two to each other. And when I looked at the preamble to the Constitution itself, it says, in the name of the Almighty God, we, the people of Ghana, in the exercise of our natural and inalienable right to establish a framework of government which shall secure for ourselves and posterity the blessings of liberty, which I have scored very high, equality of opportunity, which I have scored quite low, and prosperity. I thought that my Happy New Year greetings should be posted on the Constitution. Having established a constitutional basis, I now wish you, Mr. Chairman, the audience online and here, a happy and a prosperous New Year. Thank you.
I think our speaker deserves another round of applause. Please, let's do that for him. Thank you so much. The lawyer who has come to shred the law, not into pieces, but into compartments. Thank you so much for helping us. If you have a comment or a question, kindly show by hand. But before then, I would invite the two members of parliament to give us just 2 minutes each commentary on what he has said, maybe specifically on the one that bothers on parliament or the constitution generally, because they are both lawyers. I heard them calling each other senior. I don't know who is senior, but so who is the senior? Okay. Councillor Atachi, please give us 2 minutes, quick response. Maybe you can do it from there. I'll just give the microphone. Can I have an extra microphone, please, from the back? Okay, I'm told you have to be here for the camera, so kindly.
I'm particularly excited that I came because it's a very, very, very thought-provoking lecture, and it's going to enrich my own thinking. But I have a problem with what he said, that when he gives lectures, he doesn't deliver a paper. But I, as a lawyer, I know of the Hamlin lectures, which can take you to 1917. So the people who are not in this room, how are they going to have the benefit of what you said when you are not even there? So please, you need to change your style and document what you think. Because at the end of the day, how Jesus succeeded against the devil, he said, it is written. What is written is eternal. So David, with the greatest of respect to you, do not just talk into the air so that my grandson will come and read what you said. I was also a bit, concerned that what did you eat in the morning and you were drinking water like that? I was surprised. You have been drinking water, this small lecture to the water you drank. What is the meaning of this? Yeah. But that is a joke, yes. Well, this disquisition is extremely excellent. And I do not think I can improve on what he said. Very, very important. The only thing that I have a challenge with all the time is to just ignore the end of the equation, the masses, and the mentality of the masses. In all that he said, it's important. The Constitution is there. The Constitution is intended to improve the people. But what is the mentality of the masses? That discussion is always absent. Let me tell you one of the things that I see also, that the people will have the government they want. Today, as we are making discussions, somebody believes that I will not vote you into power unless you give me money. I'm about to help you, but if you don't pay the gate fee, I won't open you to come and help you. It's there. And we should look at it. At the end of the day, the poverty of the poor is their own poverty. So the man brings you, the man who is not very competent to help, brings you a few coins to get the power, and he doesn't have much input. So we should look at that dimension also. Because at the end of the day, if you don't want to elect good people, you have good government. That is my humble view. And good people should not be the ones who are saying that, oh, I have big ideas, but my pocket is not deep. So you shut off all the good people who come and, practice the Constitution and improve the Constitution and improve the life of the people. And then the averages will go. By reason of the coins they'll give to the masses. And that area is my heartbeat. And in good time, I'm also going to address it. So, David, you've done a powerful job, and I'm very, very enriched. This morning that I came, and I'm looking forward to finding more of the lectures that you've done. I've never heard them or read them, and it's going to help me so much. Thank you very much for what you've done.
Thank you so much, Honorable Atacha. Please follow him on Twitter. He has a lot of stuff there. Council.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Standing on all the protocols that have been established, I want to thank my former partner and a very good friend, DOD, David Ofosu-Dorte, for a very excellent lecture. I left my constituency yesterday night. Having spent 1 week there, I wanted to spend more time. But when I got the invitation, I called you and I said, I'm going to cut short the visit so I can be here this morning. And that's why I'm here. And, it's the thing that Atacha said. I have been very much enriched by the lecture this morning. It's a very excellent lecture. But I have wished that you had a paper, just like Honorable Atacha has said, that we can always refer to. There's one thing that David and I agree on, which I said here last year at this same forum. I said, the problem is not with the Constitution. The problem is with us and with the operators of the Constitution. That's the exact same words that I use, the operators of the Constitution. David calls them the users of the Constitution. We have a very excellent Constitution that provides, the framework of governance. And it says in Article 1 of the Constitution that we must exercise the powers of government to enhance the welfare and prosperity of our citizens. Somehow or another, since 1993, we have not lived up to that billing. And the managers of the Constitution are the ones who are to blame for everything. But I had two questions to ask, and I want to take this opportunity to ask those two questions. There were two things that you said that struck me as very profound. That is the issue of taxation, and your proposal that we should have, a limit. I don't know whether it's going to be a statutory limit or a limit imposed by interpretative, the exercise of the interpretative jurisdiction of the Supreme Court on how much taxes we can bear as citizens. But you would all agree with me, won't you, that there's a symbiotic relationship between citizenship and taxation. The question of taxation without representation, which, animated all the political agitations and upheavals that resulted in, the Magna Carta and all those wonderful documents that underpin Western constitutional democracy, showed that this symbiotic relationship must exist between the government and the governed. Now, would you agree with me that it is the utilization of the taxes that is the problem, and not the mere fact of the imposition of the taxes? Because if you look at all the taxes that you listed, all right, Parliament had good intentions in imposing them. But how have they been utilized? The GET fund that you mentioned, we have misused it. National Health Insurance Levy that you mentioned, we have misused it, and so on. So the problem, in my view, is with how the taxes are utilized and not with the mere imposition of the taxes. Would you agree? On the issue of the binding or non-binding character of advice proffered to the president, the case that was cited in Professor Atubuga's book was a case that I personally argued before the Supreme Court. That is the case of GBA and Attorney General. If you read the report, you would see the angle that I took, which was eventually accepted by the Supreme Court. I had taken the view that as far as appointments are concerned, the Constitution is very explicit that the appointing authority is the president. You realize that the crux of the issue there was the appointment of justices of the Supreme Court, and whether or not the advice provided by the Judicial Council must be binding on the president. So we took the view, and that is the Attorney General took the view that that advice should not be binding, because if it is binding, it then means that the Judicial Council becomes the appointing authority, because whatever it says with respect to a nominated justice then is binding on the president. But David, I want you to probably clarify one thing in relation to the binding character of advice. I take the view that non-binding advice is not necessarily bad advice, and that binding advice is not necessarily good advice. So again, it comes down to how the advisee utilizes the advice that has been given, right? So if a president has been giving good advice with respect to a nominee for the position of, let's say, minister, deputy minister, or chief executive, or Supreme Court appointee, and so on, and the president decides to ignore that advice and go ahead and appoint that person, is it the fault of the advisor or the fault of the advisee? And does that boil down to the constitutional character of the advice that was being given, whether it is binding, the legal character of the advice, whether it is binding or non-binding advice? I want you to clarify that. Thank you very much for a wonderful lecture. As Atachia has said, we have been very enriched, and I would have wished that we had, a written document that we could file in the law libraries for future law students to refer to. But thank you. God bless you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Dominic Ayine, former Deputy Attorney General. David, I think what they are doing is they are setting a trap for you. If you have it in print, they'll give it to the speaker. It's good you don't have it in print. We should also just quickly hear from Dr. Nyaho Tamakulu before you. Doc, over there, if you could just come here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I won't be able to stand long like the others have done because I'm 80 years old. Firstly, I would like to thank the speaker, the lecturer, and I don't regret at all for coming here, because he spoke on issues that we are aware of in this country. Our problem is how to handle it. To me, it is the inability of the Ghanaian, be you a leader or an ordinary person in society, to say no on principle. That is our problem. If our ministers can say no on principle, they will resign. And I believe if we had been in a democratic institution, most of the ministers would have resigned, because we are trending wrongly. It takes some time to build up a democracy. At the same time, we shouldn't forget the same democracy can be destroyed within a second. All I will say to the lecturer, that he's open gates that will help the people of this country. We have to learn the culture of resignation. If we did that, or we do that, the problems of this country will be solved. Thank you.
So, thank you, and it's a pleasure to meet you for the first time, Dr. Nyaho Tamakulu, and thanks for your advice. And also, I agree with you completely on the issue of people being not bold enough to to resign or to say no, I had occasion to serve on the board of a state institution. And everything was going wrong on that. Now one day told the chairperson I wasn't coming to the board meeting again. In fact, they sent the board allowances to my office and the Christmas hamper, and I sent it back. Now, that's a state institution. And I said, there's no point sitting on this board if you wouldn't do the right thing. The chairperson came to see me, and I said, no, I won't come back. When you begin to change your mindset, some of us are ready to. I think it's something that we need to encourage, and something that maybe the Center for Civic Education, should be encouraging people to do more. So I agree with you. On the question of non-binding advice, Dr. Aini, who happens to be my former partner, just by the way, some of us really don't care too much about partisan politics. My two partners, when I started the firm, initially was Yabu Abiyansamwa, and then Dominic Aini came. So one NDC, one MPP. I don't know, they were both in parliament at some point. I don't know how they manage this politics. I just cannot wrap my head around it. Having said that, on the question of binding and unbinding advice, I think I addressed the issue. My point is that the advice should not be binding. But the Council of States, so not the Judicial Council, the Council of States advice, except when the advice is security related, should be made public. That's my recommendation. So that if they recommend or they give advice to the president consecutively twice, and that's what I said, and he doesn't accept it, Parliament should be made to vote on that advice. It's a way of limiting the power of the president. And I pose the question, did anybody advise the president not to go to IMF or to go to IMF? Because I think we should have gone to IMF. I think we went at the wrong time. And the reason is very simple. The debt suspension agreement was there. And I believe we had gone at the right time. We would have signed the debt suspension agreement in the Paris Club of Creditor Nations, and probably the situation would have been less strenuous than we have now. So I would be happy to know if an organ like the Council of State gave advice. Definitely I wouldn't know, and I believe that they did. But in going forward, the few recommendations I have about the Constitution is that that advice should stop being secret. If a person dispenses with good advice, and I agree, advice is not necessarily good or bad, but if a person consistently dispenses with good advice, then we ought to know. Then the people's representative will know that you are not listening to advice, and then it will be a way of judging the president. And that's my recommendation. On the question of tax, also I think I explained, and let me drink water, and I touch just for the avoidance of doubt, I drink water all the time. It's not because I took anything this morning. In fact, I have not eaten. It is my way of keeping my body rehydrated, and especially when I speak. So those who listen to me know that I drink water all the time. Yeah, so that's it. That explains it. But coming back on tax, I think you take it to the point of whether or not the problem is tax utilization. I disagree completely. The problem is not just tax utilization, it's just one of them. Now, in Nigeria, during the tenure of Governor Fashola in Lagos, he was known to have utilized the tax so well that people were calling radio stations asking where they could pay tax. So I agree that if you utilize tax very well, but that's not my issue here. There are two problems with taxation. One is that those who pay the tax are the only people who are paying. And give me a couple of minutes to explain this. My law firm has been audited by GRA every single year since 2010. Every year. They pour people there. In fact, the more I speak, the more they come. And they will audit you and audit and audit and audit. And anytime I can say, okay, I know some businesses have never been audited. GRA itself said that 62% of Ghanaian enterprises have never been audited. This GRA statement, just about 4 months ago, that they've only audited 38%. If you've audited 38% and you are always auditing the 38%, a lot of people are not paying tax, and I'll come to that. So you keep auditing. In fact, somebody said in Ghana, if you make the mistake of paying tax, then they come after you. Don't pay in the first place. So the truth is that we are not adequately collecting the tax, and therefore a few of us are overburdened. Which is why I make a recommendation, and I'll answer your question. Anytime the tax goes above a certain percentage, and I can give you a percentage. Look, even God's tithe is 10%. Corporate tax is 25%. Average tax in terms of income, per individual income ranges anything between 3% or 0 if you are below a certain line to about 15%. Once you cross a certain point, you are going as high as 35%. My view is that any time an individual's income tax goes above 40%, there should be a legislation preventing the government from doing that. Similarly, corporate tax should not go above 25%. And I'm going to draw your attention to something that I want to draw the public's attention to. There has been the G20 have said that there should be global minimum tax, corporate tax of 15%. I want you to find out whether GRA is coming up with any policy on that. What I want us to avoid is a situation where big global corporates are made to reduce their tax here to 15%, which will then begin to tax more domestic businesses like Amar's company, which are located here. Because so far as I'm concerned, the global 15% tax is a minimum. It doesn't mean you cannot go above. And therefore, all we need is that let's have a limit as to how much you can tax corporate and because if we don't, we keep adding the levies. And how do we arrive at that? We arrive at that not just by corporate and income tax. No, we add all the levies, excluding VAT. As for VAT, it's just an expenditure tax. The things that you are levying me for, COVID happens and you are levying me 1%. All the things you levy me for, that enable me get my income to more than 40%. Because once you cross 40%, you are denying me of disposable income. That is the concept why when you take a bank loan, they check whether you already have a debt somewhere. Once you are already paying more than 40%, they won't be able to give you the loan. So that's my recommendation. There's another more serious recommendation. Every government, no exception, has always said we need to increase the tax net. That's everyone. Why haven't we? So two things. One, there should be a legislation that judges the government on whether or not they are actually increasing the tax bracket. And I made several recommendations here. Maybe it was missed. We missed the voter ID. If we turn the voter ID into bank accounts, we bring everybody into the bank accounts. And I'll show you how we can do that very easily. We missed e-levy. We should not have used e-levy to tax as a basis for taxing Momo. We should have used Momo as a basis for opening bank accounts for everybody. Why? Because if you move the 5 million who GRA can easily check their bank accounts and audit them. Look, I was on a panel one day. A person applied for a job from GRA, for a job as an auditor. And then he asked, at the end of the interview panel, I asked him, what salary are you expecting? Then he said, oh, just what you are paying here. And I'm like, what do you mean what you are paying? How do you know? He said, I'm a GRA. I check the taxes, that the salaries of people, of companies before I apply for a job. Yes. So he knew how much that was. Now, I'm saying this because once you have a bank account, it's easy for GRA to track how much you are earning and come after you. What about if you don't have a bank account? So if we had used the voter ID card or the Momo to put everybody in the bank account, I would have done something very simple. And it's not too late for us to do it. I would have introduced a turnover tax. A turnover tax of 5% of everybody who doesn't have a TIN number. If you don't have a TIN number, we should assume that 5% of every money you earn is actually turnover that I should tax. I won't introduce Momo. I would rather tax you on the turnover on the money that goes through your Momo, and the telcos should deduct it instantly. It's an easier way. It puts everybody into the tax bracket. It forces people to get a TIN number, because for you not to be paying turnover tax, you will take a TIN number. That is the way to broaden the tax net. In a modern economy, if you are failing to broaden the tax net, the issue is not about utilization of tax. It's about how much you are not collecting the taxes and punishing those who are paying. Now, let me go to the next. So I've dealt with the taxation issue. I think that others were comments, that I don't really, I'll touch on the water part. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's hear from you now. I have a microphone floating around. Let's start from here. Just introduce yourself and ask your question or comment.
Hello, my name is Amar D. Pari, Executive Chairman of IPMC. Two comments from my side. First is a comment, and the second would be a question to David. The comment would be on the advisory role being played by the Council of States, and to use the India example, where we have the Council of States, which is called the upper house or the Rajya Sabha. If we introduce checks and balances as is present in other countries, so any bill which is passed in the parliament or the lower house must go to the upper house, in this case the Council of States, for the final approval. And the upper house or the Council of States can reject the bill 2 times. That's the only thing they can do. They can reject it 2 times. Eventually, the bill can get passed, but by that time, the media and all citizens would know that this bill has been rejected by 2 times and why it was. So they can make up their mind next time whether we should elect this party or not. That would be... Now, coming to my question, one of the conclusions, and I think the main conclusion, David, your presentation has been that the Constitution is strong, but it's the users or the operators of the Constitutions which need to be disciplined. And in this case, we need to bring certain amendments in the Constitution, which I think will reduce the powers of the users. But it's the same people who are into power, and how will they allow such amendments which reduce their powers? Thank you.
Thank you so much. From this block, do I have any hand up? This block. Yes, is there a hand there? Okay.
Yes, please. Sorry, there's a hand here. My name is Justice Abdullahi. Thank you. So, Senior, my question is that you make the argument for Supreme Court justices to have an extended period at the Supreme Court. I think the same argument goes for all other civil and public servants. Because at that age, they also get matured, they get more experienced, and they can indeed offer better services to the people of Ghana. Would you, by that argument, advocate for a complete extension of time for all other public and civil servants, rather than limiting it to members of the Supreme Court? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Justice. Do I have any more hands here? I think there's one at the extreme end, at the back. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Samson Amponsah. So I'll build on the question of my lecturer, Justice Abdullahi. On the Supreme Court justices, you were making an advocacy that we consider possibly extending their ages of retirement because we may draw from their years of experience. Looking at the nature of our legal system and the fact that we have appeals which arise as of right, so that the case can travel from the district court right to the Supreme Court, and even on review. And the fact that in recent times, it is clear that there's a lot of burden on our Supreme Court. Will you not rather advocate that we extend the jurisdiction of our Court of Appeal so that possibly we make our Supreme Court a constitutional court? In that way, if we limit the justices to 9 or 15, the burden of work that will be on them will be lower as compared to rather trying to extend their ages, because the old age comes with frailties, and Dr. Nyaho himself demonstrated today that it's not easy being 80 and being a Supreme Court judge. And the fact that we don't even have a culture of resignation. We may have 95-year-olds who will still want to sit on the bench even though they cannot even write a thing. So I want you to clarify on that. Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much. I'm going to take the answers from here, then when I come back, we'll take from this group, starting with Bridget. So, yes.
Thank you. I mean, on the question of extending the retirement age of Supreme Court judges, I think there are 2 questions relating to that. The last one, I think my problem has to do with the fact that they belong to the group of people who, 2 things generally, it is believed they get more matured at that age. And even more important for me, remember my lecture was about the economic doom issue. It's about the cost, and I showed the chart on the cost we incur on people who have retired. And that is the problem. So if you, for example, and I'm not looking for the American extension of no limit to the age. If you had them for 5 more years, 10 more years, and limit the number, because there were 2 recommendations, limit the number, cap the number, and extend the age. I think I still stand by that recommendation. Having said that, whether I will extend it to all public servants, the answer is no. Not all public servants retire on their salary. Not all public servants are Supreme Court judges. and it is of a character that worldwide it tends to have that character. So that would be my recommendation. There was a question from Mr. Amma about how I expect the very people who are, for want of a better way, benefiting from the system to implement. Actually, I'm not expecting that. That is why I commend UPSA and One Ghana movement for lectures like this, because at the end of the day, it is when people talk and say these things more and more that eventually it gathers some kind of momentum. And when people are ever given the chance to amend the Constitution, they look at these things. I highly recommend that we should look at the Constitution more as an economic issue than pure legalist. That's one of the problems I think we have. I think there was an earlier question that was asked that I didn't answer. That was from Mr. Tachia on the citizens' mindset. If you look at the formula, I talked about citizens' responses. If I break down the citizens' responses mathematically, the mindset is actually number 1. And it's something I tweet about at least twice a week. It's a major issue. But the mindset problem is also caused by politicians. Because politicians end up, as it were, paying their way into power. You see, I have been asked several times why I don't go into politics. And I once tweeted a response to that. Somebody said, you keep making good recommendations, but the price good men pay for not going into politics is that they are ruled by bad men. I'm paraphrasing it. And I said, I disagree with Socrates and Plato completely. There are many people who are not, they can't disagree with. Look, I read Plato, I read Socrates, but I'm free to disagree with them when their system is either wrong as at now. Because at times we tend to use present circumstances over past circumstances. Many of the things we call culture, as somebody said, are actually solutions whose problem we have forgotten. Now, let me explain this. In Plato and Socrates' time, they were amphitheaters. Everybody could gather into this place and debate. And therefore, if you are a good person or you have ideas and you don't come and debate, you'll be ruled by people with bad ideas. That's true. But that's not true today. Today, it is easier, and that was my tweet, it is easier for a corrupt person to buy his way into parliament than for a good, honest man to get an assembly seat. And the price good people pay for entering into politics is that they are overwhelmed by bad people. I can guarantee you, and you know this, there are many, very good people in MPP and NDC, moderates, who want to do a unity, who want to do, let us get a central agenda, etc. They are overwhelmed by the bad people. That situation has changed. In fact, the best thing a good person can do today is to stay out of politics and keep talking until the masses' mindset change, because the only thing politicians fear are the masses. That's what we should be doing. That's why I commend this type of lecture. I don't believe good people should go into politics. And let me end on this note on that one. Nobody can convince me that MPP and NDC haven't had good men. There are 2 sitting in front of me, gone into politics. I know them personally. They are good. Have you changed anything? They have been overwhelmed. You have been overwhelmed. Lastly, on the question of paper. Yes, I actually write papers and I published a few. But when it comes to presentations like this, I disagree with the approach where a person comes to just read treaties and people don't relate to it. Yes, I'm converting this into a paper, and I know Prof will be asking me for that paper. So, yes, they will get the paper, and copies will be, distributed. Yeah. That's where repentance.
Thank you. Please, where's my microphone? Bridget Jogbanuku, please. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Okay. I like the camouflage with the mask, you see. Thank you very much. This is my first time hearing you in person, and it's good to know that there are still a few righteous people in the land. I liked your quote about the law. There's no law so good. I mixed it up, but there's no law so good as to keep an evil person from doing evil and all that. You mentioned a lot of places like Switzerland and Singapore and Rwanda. And I think the difference between them and us is our values. What are our values and what do we value in Ghana? We don't seem to have values. The things we value are wealth, so we can flaunt it, and acquisition of knowledge, not to apply, but also to flaunt the letters. So we are in pursuit of these two things, and with our chieftaincy, that is what is respected. So he's rich. Oh, have you seen his house? Have you seen the car he rides in and all that? Oh, he's knowledgeable. You go anywhere and they must. My friend Umaru here in an interview with him once during the election said, "What is your profession?" I don't have a profession. I sell oil, palm oil. But so it's, we value these things, but the true values that will make us like the Rwanda and the Switzerland and the, what was it? Our discipline. There's no discipline. Right up to the top, there's no discipline. There's no responsibility. We're not responsible. It's not us. It's COVID. It's Ukraine. It's the other political party. It's never us. And I hate to bring the gender in here, but it started from Adam. It's the woman you put with me. So until, and these are some of them, discipline, responsibility, how committed are we to Ghana? We're not committed to Ghana. We are committed to ourselves. We are committed to how much we can make. And maybe if we stretch it, yes, to our political party, that is it. There's no commitment. Honesty, no. I have been told that you are too honest. Nobody will vote for you. We don't have those values. And you say we are overtaxing, we are making people poorer because we have no love. I mean, it sounds very basic and very subjective, but we have no love and compassion for each other. We don't. And of course, that will bring in the inclusiveness. It's NDC or NPP, and if you're anything else, you are not going to be there. And in fact, in Ghana, it's a lot of male. If you are a woman, we'll see how we can bring you in. So we talk up the gender thing, but we don't actually practice it. So these are the things, our values. And until we stop talking about, the education. I have a quote here which says, "Education without values, as useful as it seems, as useful as it is, seems rather to make a man a cleverer devil." And that is what we've done with our education, to make ourselves cleverer devils. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Please give the microphone to him. Yeah.
My name is Patrick Akoli, the former chief executive of GOEL. Mr. Dorte, you've done very well. But, among the three arms of government, you've labeled the legislature as a complete failure, or more or less. More or less. One of the things that have come up all these years is that the Constitution says the president must appoint at least 50% or more, I'm not a lawyer, of his ministers from parliament. So if you are in the majority side, at any time, you want to catch the eye of the president because you may want to become a minister or a deputy minister. I personally think this is adding to the failure of parliament. And we've been talking about constitutional review at least since, maybe 2010 or something. There was even a commission on it. Each year it comes up. Each year it comes up. And things are getting a little bit murkier. Because you are now saying we are in what? The constitution has landed us into what? Economic doom. When? What is the time frame? What are you waiting for? From doom to where? When are we going to do that review? Well, maybe the experts like you will help us.
Thank you so much. Yes. Okay. Yes. Please take it to the middle rows.
Hello, my name is Safo. I don't have any big position. I was just a student of Mr. David. So my question is this. You touched on political parties and how theoretically we are supposed to gain value from the ideas they had. But for over a period, what I have realized is that there's no longer patriotism to the country, but rather patriotism to the political parties and how political parties can grow and further. So my question is, how does Mr. David think that you can whip the country back into a position whereby political parties' rules are what we were supposed to get theoretically, that is providing us with ideals on how a country is supposed to go on, rather than this duopoly we have gotten, which there is more of patriotism and loyalty to the political parties rather than to the country in which one belongs. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Like the MPs who have spoken, I've been greatly enriched by this lecture. And I find that almost everybody identifies the problem to one thing.
Yes, you haven't introduced yourself.
Maybe two. My name is Samson Ladi. I'm a lawyer. Now, Bridget just spoke about values. I've had the opportunity of hosting quite a good number of respected citizens who are quiet, who want to be in their quiet and don't want to be seen and be heard, at least. And they are worried about values. But the next thing is that you tie it to what Mr. Ofosu-Dorte kept saying. If bad people want to do what they want to do, the Constitution will not stop them. So values first. And second, that leads to my question. We can't seem to measure incrementally what development we get from the duopoly. So at least on the national development planning, when the Constitution Review Commission recommended that it be made, its plans be made binding, is there a way to agree, and do you subscribe to that? It was drawing up a 40 or 40 years plus plan so that we can tell that if one government says, I want to do affordable housing, we know that we have done one set of affordable housing in 2020, we'll do the next this year, and we fit it into the plan. Not in a situation where, like we presently have. The best example to give is Seglime. We have how many houses sitting there, and they are rotting away. Recently, the media has been there and shown us the pictures. Almost $200 million sunk into a place for good purpose. We need about 100 million more, we are told, for on-site and off-site infrastructure. We can't do it. So it's sitting there and it's rotting. Is there a way by which the people can compel the leadership? At least the Constitution in its preamble says the powers of government are to be exercised for the welfare of the people. The world is also coming to recognize, as we already preempted and have in Article 36, that the most secure democracy is one that provides the basic necessities of life as a fundamental duty. Is there a way to ensure this by the people? So if we can't rely on Parliament and the executive continues to disappoint, they won't listen after they have voted, is there a way out?
Thank you. Thank you, Samson. Yes, Manasseh.
My name is Manasseh Azura Wine. I work with the Fourth Estate. I would also want to add my voice to congratulate Mr. Ofosu-Dorte for this wonderful lecture. I have two issues, and they are both coming from the honorable MPs. The first one has to do with the statement that we get the leaders we deserve. I don't think it is accurate. I once said that I grew up in Kitekrachi, so if I dated a lady in Kitekrachi, there's no way this lady would ever ask me for pizza, because you can't get pizza in Kitekrachi. So the average person in the village is there. They don't know that to vote, you have to pay money to get it done. So there's a supply and demand side. The suppliers first came, set a standard, and that becomes the practice. I also have cause to believe that some of the countries we want to be like don't have very enlightened citizens. I was once in the US and we're told that war was another way of teaching Americans geography. They are about some of the most ignorant people in the world, but they have very good leaders. The Singapore that we often cite, if anybody reads Lee Kuan Yew's book, this was a broken system. There was no cohesion. This was a country that was falling apart when their colonial masters left. It took a leader to say that, look, we have to go this way, we have to get things right. And today it's a norm. So if we want to blame the citizens, then I think there's no need for leaders in the first place. The second issue has to do with Honorable Ayene's statement that it is about the expenditure and not the collection. I think recently CDD and others commended Parliament on the work done on this current budget. And that alone shows that Parliament over the years has failed us. When one of the taxes you mentioned, the sanitation levy, was introduced, I went on Facebook and said, look, this is a tax that is going to be collected to fund a certain corrupt business. Okay, just last year, we at the Fourth Estate did a right to information request to the Finance Ministry to tell us what the sanitation levy has been used for. And all the disbursements went to that same company that I predicted. And I don't think Parliament doesn't know this. Every parliamentarian belongs to an assembly, and you know that about 60% of the district assembly's common fund goes into sanitation. And there are as many as 6 or 7 contracts in each of your assemblies that goes into sanitation. So if they bring another bill that we are taking this money to go in and fund sanitation, I think Parliament should do better. And I agree with people who say Parliament is one of the worst arms of government. I did a survey on Facebook, and the question was, is Parliament a useful or useless institution? About 80% thought Parliament was useless, and I don't think it has changed. Thank you.
Thank you so much, we'll just take 2 last questions. There's a lady there, and then Duncan, and then that should be it. Yeah, I think you can speak from there. Just try if it will work. Speak from there.
Thank you, Mr. Ofosu-Dorte. I want to make a comment about what Safo said. He was talking about patriotism and a lack of it. And I think that currently, Ghanaians have become, there's a lack of general apathy in the system. And can you even blame the Ghanaians for being apathetic towards the economy and how things are run? Because nobody cares about the average or ordinary Ghanaian. After they get into power, absolutely nobody cares. So it's come to a point where you feel like, why do I even bother getting into matters of the state? Why do I even bother commenting about it? Why do I even bother attending seminars like this? Because at the end of the day, parliamentarians will do what they want to do, the executive will do what they want to do, and the country will keep getting and going on a nosedive. So I think if anything can be done, we should try and see how patriotism can be increased and people can start caring. Because if things keep going this way, at the end of the day, we are doomed. Because once nobody cares, nothing can be done about it.
Okay, thank you so much. While the microphone travels to Duncan, let me just make a quick announcement. Someone lost their bunch of keys. It's here. It was left at the table at the front office. So there are some car keys I have with me here. Kindly pick it up if it's yours. Also, Kwame Ampofo of Okwampofo Foundation, you're needed outside immediately. Thank you. Duncan.
Thank you, Maru. Thank you, David. And I had decided to keep quiet today, but sometimes you just can't keep quiet. As David did justice to the Constitution and things in there that he thinks we can work at, we can all talk about the problems the country has, but at the base of all our challenges is the hypocrisy. We can decide to throw away our Constitution today, import the American Constitution or the Swiss Constitution, and expect that that would help. It wouldn't help, because we are hypocrites, unfortunately. When one party is in opposition, my office is a very fertile ground for them. They will come to me. Petrol prices are high.
And for those who don't know your office, who are you?
The Chamber of Petroleum Consumers, Ghana. We would speak for the rights of Ghanaians to a fair, petroleum pricing regime, and then the right quality also delivered. Senor Rana, we will bring him back.
It's good you're also sitting by the OMC chairman. It's fine.
You know, when one is in opposition, the duopoly he mentions, they know all the solutions. And so you get courage, you get confidence that once, power changes hands, whether they trick us or they lie to us blatantly, or they know that nothing will change, but they come to tell us differently. So they give you the assurance, when we come, this will be done, we can change this, and fuel pricing could at least be minimized to the minimum. They know where all the taxes, like David did, are coming from. We are collecting taxes for sanitation and pollution. We collect taxes to develop the energy infrastructure. Yet, you wouldn't see where the monies go, because a certain finance minister with overbearing powers from the same constitution will decide what to do with the taxes that Parliament has approved for specifics. We all look on hypocritically and allow them to have their way. Then, when it blows up in our faces, we think that the Constitution is the problem. I think until we find a certain measure of restraint for our presidents or the executive, Ghana would never change with the Israeli Constitution, the Swiss Constitution, the American Constitution, or the unwritten UK Constitution, until we find a way to restrain the overbearing executive, such that the office of the president budget alone, sometimes you wonder what they consume there.
Okay.
And we have to pay for it.
Thank you, Duncan. Thank you so much.
Thank you,
let me now, please bring the microphone. So we're going to take the answers and then we can wrap up. Let's give it to him. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's quite a lot. Let me start from the last one. The issue of hypocrisy, I agree with you 100%, and I kind of alluded to that. At times I wonder whether as a people we have consciously stopped thinking. I made that statement a lot because it looks like what we are doing, we know is detrimental, but we keep doing it. And the best politician is the one in opposition. They know all the things. When they get there, they are not going to do the right. Apologies to my friends, but that's how we see politicians. So I agree. I think, and when I conclude, I will suggest what I think is perhaps going to happen. It's not a solution you can recommend, but I think it will happen. On patriotism, from the lady before you, yes, I agree. There's no way you can gainsay that. If there's one person who did very well on that, is Kutu Achampong. We only hear the bad things about him, but he's one person who I think did his best to instill patriotism in Ghanaians, the pledge and things like that. Probably we should pick the good things from some of those things. In Ghana, every politician starts and says the previous people did nothing. You just check. When you take over from Nkrumah did nothing. When the Achampong, nobody did anything. But you can't move to the next stage if the person didn't do anything at all. That's all we keep saying. So yes, you may not like to Achampong, but what about patriotism? What about Operation Feed Yourself? I mean, there's no doubt that during his regime, housing. I mean, look at Dansoman. You can pick the good things and do it. And the housing Dansoman was built by the military. At some point, it was the largest, what do you call it, a real estate in West Africa. And just by the way, a lot of the DFIs we borrow from were actually not here. You remember it's here into your policy. It has this downside. But there are a lot of positive sides we can build on. So we need to instill the patriotism from different angles. And I believe we will. Menace made comments. He didn't give any question to me, except that on a lighter side, Menace reminded me of a friend of mine. He was talking about Kete Krachi's pizza. So there's a friend of mine who grew up around Lolobi and had no idea what pizza or sandwich was, club sandwich was. And he dated an Accra girl who then asked for club sandwich. So I was in the house one Sunday morning. He comes to knock my door. I open the door. He said, "Do you want to eat club sandwich?" I'm like, what's happening that you bring me a club sandwich? Apparently, he didn't know what club sandwich was. So he went to one of the hotels and ordered 10. When the girl had asked for just club sandwich and realized it was embarrassing carrying all this. So he had to distribute them and leave 2 to take to the lady. Anyway, but that's on a lighter side. Menasi, thanks for reminding me about that. But on a more serious note, there's a question about the NDPC plan. What will it require to make the NDCP plan mandatory for all of us to stick to it? The challenge is that the NDPC plan itself is often not completed within one regime, and each party comes and jettisons it and starts afresh. I mean, frankly, Vision 2020 was a very good plan. One of the biggest problems, I don't know if you spoke to politicians in the close circles, was I had Rawlins's picture in front. And I'm sure if his picture had been removed, probably some people would have accepted it. But we replace it with GPRS, and then we keep replacing better agenda. I think one of the things that citizens must begin to demand, one of two things: either we let the politicians forget manifesto, so that whatever plan that is left with the last government, because if you read beyond aid, frankly, there are a lot of things there which are good, and they are the same like Vision 2020. Most of it, and they are the same like Better Ghana, GPRS, same thing. If we can say the political parties should forget their manifesto, and they should tell us how they will implement the plan which is already there. That's one way of judging them. Another way of judging them is to require the political parties to show in their manifesto how close their manifesto is to the existing one. In fact, there is Dr. K.Y. Amuakun is trying to work on that Ghana Compact, which will create a central, manifesto. One of the things I would recommend to Ghana, One Ghana movement, which, and I think you are doing excellent work, it's an idea I've always had, to create what I call the Ghana Common Manifesto, which is similar to what Dr. K.Y. Amuakun is doing. You can come together, create a manifesto that you hand over to the two political parties and say, this is a manifesto that, and we market the manifesto through the churches, wherever, that we can manage manifesto. If we market it this year and everybody knows about it, it forces the political parties in creating their manifesto to benchmark the common one. So that's a recommendation I will make on how we can achieve that. Then there is a question of, the development. That's the same thing I've talked about. Yes, there was this issue about people not being part of the system and talking us from Samson Ladiainini and talking about values, etc. I will answer that question, or it wasn't a question as such. I'll comment on that in my last comment because I think it will address this issue. Because the issue about values relates to our culture, and it's a very, very big issue. Let me give an example before. If you've been to a chief's house, and Atacha is from a royal house, if you've been to a chief's house in any of the Akan areas, I don't come from an Akan area, but I come from a chief's house, even though I'm fairly averse to chieftaincy. I must make that point. You are talking to the chief, and the chief, let me say it in Twi, and I will explain that I fear can't to me a camera. In other words, in the chief's palace, what rules is might, not the law. And when a society has that culture, it's a very, very, very serious thing to deal with. Now, Bridget, just touching on that, the typical Ghanaian, I mean, I have examined this in a paper which I wrote somewhere else on a different. What does a Ghanaian mean by the word leader? When a Ghanaian talks about leader, he doesn't mean somebody who can transform you from where you are to the next stage. He means somebody who is older, richer, a pastor, even somebody with my size of stomach. You can be seen as a leader just because you have a big stomach, right? So weight has a positive effect, on becoming a leader. When you have a situation where people have that type of mindset, you need to do a lot of cultural education through Center of Civic Education or the masses for people to change their mindset. So they follow politicians because they will give them the money, they will get the largest. The same way we follow, anything that. So we need to deal with that. Parliament, I don't think I said, if I say that, then let me change my way. I don't think I said Parliament is the failure. I said they are the most disappointing. That's what I meant, at least.
Okay, we were interpreting it for you.
Yeah, okay. I think
maybe the wish of the people that they decided to put in your mouth.
I think they are the most disappointing institution, actually. Then there was this question about discipline. I think, again, we'll go back to the formula. Hopefully, when I circulate the paper, I talk about contemporary excuses we give to ourselves. Those excuses we give to ourselves to explain away our indiscipline. Look at all the excuses that every finance minister has given. It's always external forces. And as the speaker said, it's never us. It's always some external force. And we always have a way to justify it. That's what I call contemporary excuses to explain away our failure to respond. The citizens' response is something we need. And there was a comment from on this issue about Ghanaians. Ghanaians, a lot of people think we are humble. We are not humble people. We are actually a pompous people. Any group of people who expect to be carried shoulder high just because you are a royal, they are not simple, are not humble people. Look, one of the institutions I should have touched on briefly is I touched on it, but let me emphasize that chieftaincy, right? And I keep talking about, and by the way, I'm from a royal house. I'm qualified to be a chief myself. How do you have a provision in the constitution which, after defining the chief as a person who comes from a specific blood, etc., is paid by my taxes? We pay them. We give them allowances. And queen mothers too. Why do I pay somebody just because he or she is a royal? Like, seriously, in this century? When they give our lands out for galamsey and all those kind of things. Anyway, we need to rethink it. And it's part of our culture that we need to deal with. Having said that, I think I've touched on all, but is there hope for this country? Yes, I think there's a lot of hope, and I'm extremely hopeful. But I'm hopeful for two reasons. One is that don't let and if you're talking to the individuals and business, don't posit your hope for the future on government. The more you ignore government's plans, the more better you will become. Because you can't guarantee that they won't give excuses for their failure. And it doesn't matter whether it's MPP or NDC. And that's why I have a lot of hope. Secondly, I believe there are 4 ways any nation will move forward. Unfortunately, many people, academics, etc., write only about 3. The first one is a leader, where the leader takes people, and someone talk about Lee Kuan Yew, etc. And I've said this several times. I had a rare fortune of meeting Lee Kuan Yew in person. And he sat in a room like this and allowed us to ask questions. 2 hours, no holds barred. So I did not just read his book. I sat in a room where Lee Kuan Yew allowed questions. And he talked about everything, including Ghana, his visit to Ghana, etc. If you leave that room, you will never be the same person again. So leadership, I know how strong leadership can make a change. Unfortunately, I don't think we have it. And we are going to have it. The second way is the elite. When a critical mass of elite come together, which is the type 1 Ghana movement and many are trying to do, struggling. But they should keep on. When the elite gather together, the thinking processes of the elite can pull people. Unfortunately, the mistake the elite make is when they join party politics. Exactly. Then they split the elite front. And many has happened. And I'm saying the more the elite stay out of politics, I believe the better we will be. The third is a revolt of the masses. That's a third way. That happened in the Arab Spring, etc. It changes society. I don't think we are going to have that. But there's a fourth nobody talks about. It's what I call the convergence of unintended consequences. There are a time in this life of a society where many things happen. Digital revolution, digitization, recession, Ukraine war, a lot of things that nobody expects to converge. That suddenly converges. And when it converges, leadership, unfortunately, becomes irrelevant. Unless our leaders understand that one day the convergence will happen and they will become so irrelevant, they will not recover. And for that reason, I have a lot of hope. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Well, that's been very insightful. Thank you so much, Mr. David Ofosu-Dorte. We have to wrap up now. Let me just say that this program is put together by One Ghana Movement with support or collaboration from the Law Faculty of the University of Professional Studies, UPSA. And the faculty members are here. Please give us a wave, as well as students. Thank you so much for joining us. And I think it's only fair then at this time to invite your dean, Professor Kofi Abochi, to give us the closing remarks.
Thank you all. Thank you, our keynote speaker. There's an interesting dialogue that took place in the book Animal Farm, in which one of the animals was mourning rather sadly for the death of one of the human beings who had attempted to retake over power. And as they pushed back the human beings, he died in the process. So the animal was lamenting. And one of the revolutionary leaders, seeing the animal lamenting, was shocked and reminded him that he's an animal. He's not a human being, so he doesn't have to lament for a human being. But ended the quotation by something which was instructive by saying, the only good human being is a dead one. And I'm saying that because of our two distinguished honorable members of parliament, of former ministers who are in front, that it turns out, and I think you mentioned it too, it turns out that the only good politicians are those in opposition, or those who leave power. And so when they are not in power, they're good. They say all the good things. They lament with us, they demonstrate with us, they're angry like us, and they are like us. And then they become politicians when in power. It is the reason why, David, you've said all that you've said. Because just as you said, which I also quite agree with, the Constitution barely has problems. There are problems. But overall, our Constitution is superior to the American Constitution. It is denser than the American Constitution. In fact, the Americans would like to have our Constitution, but their amendment processes are so complicated and difficult. And so they look at they will look at our Constitution and think we are superior. And yet we're here lamenting. And so the reality is we are actually the cause of the problems. There's one thing you didn't mention, but you can't mention everything, so I appreciate that. You don't have the time of the day, so you can only say so much. But the receding role of the state. The Constitution divides the state into political and a state. But we've gotten to a point where there's no state. The role of the state has been taken over by the political. And that was compounded by the Presidential Transition Act, which was supposed to come and cure a problem, but came and worsened it. So that now, from election to election, the entire spectrum of the state will have to change and become politicized. We don't have a space we say this is the state and this is the political. And the Constitution creates and allows the state because there must be permanency built around change. But what we have now had is that we have had constant state of change. Every time a new government comes, a complete wipe-off. Now, because of the Presidential Transitions Act, every new government is also looking out for who is part of us and who is not, so that we bring our own. We have all become part of the problem, and it is a huge, sad commentary, I'll have to say, the passage of the Presidential Transition Act, which was designed to cure a problem. You can't say it all, so I'm sorry I have to say this because you can't come back, but I think you agree. So we take it like that. But I'd like to, at this stage, my second role is to thank all of you for coming. I'm especially indebted to Dr. Nyao Nyao Tamaklo, who is sitting here and who has just informed all of us is 80. Unless I didn't hear that. I thought I heard something like that. But indeed, yes, maybe he's 80 or more, but let's say, certainly a senior citizen by all standards, and as indicated, we should pray and hope that we'll get to 80 and hold the microphone. So we are honored for your time spent with us. I would like to thank especially my two distinguished friends, Honorable Atachia, whom I have been honored to be close to for some time, and with whom we share a lot of things in private, and the Honorable Dr. Dominic Ayene, who happened to be a former partner of our speaker, and in respect of whom I was a junior in Chambers when I started my law practice. Since David did not mention the details of their in-house stuff, I will not mention the details of our in-house stuff. I would like to thank our most dignified, honorable, former presidential candidate, Miss, I think Oliver Ajokmenoku, that's it, who happens to be an oil palm seller or oil seller or something like that. She has informed all of us that unemployment is a choice. You decide today, if you don't call yourself a professional, you have our whole former presidential candidate, she's in the space of selling. You can become a seller too. I would like to acknowledge all other distinguished personalities, including our bosses from IPMC and many other personalities. Unfortunately, I can't mention everyone by name, but I've seen a few distinguished people who have come upstage and spoken. The reality is that we all want the good of the realm, and the failure of Ghana is a failure of all. The Constitution was adopted for a good cause. I think many years down the line, we all know we haven't gotten the Constitution we would have wished for, not the paper Constitution, and that's a mistake. For anybody who has time to read something new, go and read a book written by an American constitutional scholar called Lawrence Tribe, and the title of the book is The Unwritten Constitution. The true Constitution is unwritten. The Constitution we still have, the true one is unwritten. And that unwritten one, the Constitution itself mentions the word, and that word is called the spirit of the Constitution. Every provision in there has a spirit, and the spirit is a reason. Every provision in there has a good reason. But human ingenuity would constantly craft a good reason into bad. And that is the reason I still think that our Constitution is operable with the little problems that we have. In the circumstances, we would hope that be it the NDC or the MPP, or be it the PPP. You took issue with me last year about this, but I'll say it. But then I'm talking about those with representation. But if any of those, any of the ones with P, all of you have P. NDC, I doesn't have P. So some don't have P. It's with P. Well, I won't say it's no confusion. I don't want issues. But be it any of the parties, I think I'm saved. Any of the parties who come into power, just remember this day when David mounted the podium and in fact spoke the obvious. Because what David has said, we're all nodding because he was just reminding us of the obvious. Everything he's spoken about, few of them contain new theories. They are things we know, but very often they are beclouded, very often they are distorted, very often we are confused, and of course, we'll have people who would have us believe sometimes that white is black, and then occasionally we wonder. I think you mentioned the issue about we've gotten to a point, we've consciously stopped thinking. Yes, you mentioned that expression. So I'd like to thank all of us. We would continue the dialogue and the debate, and would hope that Ghanaians will get to that point where we can all join hands in true nation building, as it should be. This is a precursor to the Constitution Day, which comes off on Saturday. So God bless our homeland, Ghana. And as the One Ghana has indicated, honor the pledge, because the pledge says, I promise on my honor to be faithful and loyal to Ghana, my motherland. I'll leave it here before I miss lines. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you.